People who found out about someone else's double life. What's the story? Retired lawyer here. I once represented a widow who was seeking survivor's benefits from her husband's military pension. Turns out the old goat was a trigamist who somehow managed to juggle 3 families without any of them learning about the other 2. Although there were enough unexplained absences and such that none of the 3 were terribly surprised. I'm struggling to manage 1 family, job, and trying to sleep enough. Does this man find an extra 50 hours in the day? In today's day and age, that would be impossible. But back in the 60s, 90s? Might be hectic, but not impossible. Men used to be asked to go out of town for business often. Yep, my grandfather only married my grandmother because he knocked her up and she had a son. They married after she gave birth, because if it was a girl, he wouldn't have done it. He had a girlfriend that entire time who he actually wanted to marry, and even when he and my grandmother moved to Australia from former Yugoslavia, my grandmother literally ran into his girlfriend. He didn't just come to Australia with his family, he also brought his girlfriend over too. It's the reason I won't ever get one of those genealogy tests done, at least not while my grandmother's alive. I feel like he probably had a whole other family. It's still possible today. There was an Ask Reddit thread in 2020 about men whose secret second families were exposed when they had to work from home due to COVID. Can't really work remotely from 2 homes. My mother's neighbor talks often about how her son is away from his wife and kids a lot, working abroad, running week-long courses at sea, away with his friends for a week at a time, and just generally being quite absent from home, while his wife gets no time away naturally. My husband and I have convinced ourselves that he has a second family somewhere. Not that long ago, I was in a year-long relationship with a man who had 2 other secret girlfriends. It would have been more difficult for him if he'd married any of us or had kids, for sure. But it's definitely still possible these days, especially for anyone who has a career that requires a lot of travel. I was a traveling door-to-door globe salesman in the 50s. We'd have to go to different territories often to sell our globes. I had 2 other families I supported off of globes. Nobody knew. Also, as mentioned in this case, a lot of these men are abusive, at least psychologically, if not physically. That means at least one of the wives can be bent into living in relatively squalid conditions. The husband controls access and knowledge to all finances, so it's not a big risk to be found out for him. I've seen or heard of a few stories from the kid in one of these families who grew up in poverty, while his other family's kids grew up in at least middle-class comfort. Gotta be rough finding out that your mom was the cheap side-piece wife. My sister was a victim of a situation like this. Her ex had 3 families in Wisconsin, Illinois, her in California. He'd just leave the wives to go to the others, and then come back and he was abusive. Wisconsin wife found out and contacted the other 2. My sister divorced him in 1990. He was in jail until I believe 2016-ish, lots of charges in Wisconsin, had testicular cancer, and is now in a nursing home. My sister is 63, a grandma, and cute fun despite this. Friend dated a guy for a year, super normal, perfect boyfriend vibes. One day she accidentally saw his old emails and discovered he had a whole second life, different apartment, different job, another girlfriend. He'd been juggling both worlds for years without anyone suspecting. She confronted him, he lied, but it all fell apart when the other girlfriend showed up at his main place by mistake. She ended it immediately, and everyone was left picking sides. Made her realize some people really aren't who they seem. I dated a girl years ago who'd been traumatized in the same way. She's met and dated this man for something like 3 years. He lived about a half-mile away from her. Long story short, she finds out he's been seeing another woman, and after finding out that woman lived a mile or 2 away, she confronted her at the woman's home. It was his fiancée, to whom he'd been engaged for several years. The work trips, bro travels and everything had all been outings with his fiancée and her family. Devastated her, especially finding out that all this was taking place directly under her nose. The guy is a textbook sociopath, in my opinion. In the end, this guy married his fiancée, by the way. Around year 8 of my marriage, I met my then-husband's girlfriend of 9 months. He told me he was working doubles on his night off, night shift worker, but he was bunking at her place those nights and crawling out of her bed at 5 a.m. to come home from work. I was packing him lunches for his fucking sleepovers with her. Once she and I knew about each other, we swapped photos and stories. Her apartment was full of photos of them together. She even had him on her insurance plan. She had zero clue he was married, thought they were endgame, the whole thing. Once I filed for divorce, I let her know he was all hers, and apparently they stayed together for about 2 months. Then he cheated on her with the next one. My aunt did 23andMe, and that's how we all found out about the second family my late grandpa had and abandoned in the 1960s. Turns out I have 2 extra uncles. My mom's family moved to the other side of the USA in the late 1960s. My mom now believes that they moved because my grandma found out about my grandpa's mistress. My grandpa always doted on me and his other grandchildren from the kids he had in wedlock. It's been hard to wrap my head around the fact that he straight up abandoned 2 of his kids and might even have grandchildren that he never met. I have this friend I've known since daycare. When her mom got pregnant, her dad just ghosted her. Turned out he was married and was soon getting another kid. His family never found out. My friend actually did 23andMe, hoping her half-sister does it too someday and finds out about the other family. My life story. My bio dad ghosted when my mom was pregnant with me. She found out later he was married and had a family. She was devastated at being an unwitting participant in infidelity. I did the Ancestry DNA swab and hope someday his family stumbles on the results. My stepmom did this recently, found out she has siblings, not only across the country but across the globe. She is retired but has siblings that are in their early 30s. Her dad was in the Air Force, then worked for a major airline, so he was jet-setting everywhere, meeting them at local dives and one-night standing families. I was the unknown brother that reached out to my sibling, whom I thought had some idea I existed. It was a weird situation in which I have 2 older half-siblings, unrelated to each other, who went to the same school and knew of each other. I came along when the one unrelated to my father started working at his restaurant and introduced my mother to him. So I was always working under the assumption that as my siblings knew of each other, that it wasn't going to be much of a secret that I existed. Well, they knew of each other, but didn't ever talk, and my father never told the one that the woman he had dated for a while was having a kid. So it came as a bit of a shock to him, but enough facts lined up that he trusted me enough to approach our father for the truth of it. And the weirdest thing is that out of all my siblings, he is the one I am most similar to. Like, I share almost none of the same interests or hobbies as my siblings I grew up with, but the one that I didn't is the one who I can relate to the most. This is why my half-siblings and I are honest when our unknown bio family reaches out on the DNA sites. Our shared father was a sperm donor, and while some people have been quick to tell me it's not my business and I could ruin his life, the truth is just much better than the alternative in our case. Otherwise, it looks like he bounced around the Tri-County area, having 7+ kids with different mothers in the year before he got married. My office hired a new admin receptionist. He seemed nice and normal in the interview, but then stopped showing up to work, always leaving voicemails with more and more elaborate and dramatic excuses about why he was out, e.g., he was in a car accident and in the hospital fighting for his life. Pray for me. Turns out he had accepted multiple other jobs and wasn't showing up to any of them either, but he was getting paid by all of them. I know a guy that's done similar things with remote jobs. He's working 3x full-time jobs. He's even hired a temp from Philippines to pretend to be him and reply to basic emails and juggle meetings so they never clash. In fairness, he's actually doing all 3 jobs and even goes into the office for them time to time. All are in the same industry, in the same city. He uses his middle name as his work name, but it's only a matter of time before he gets caught. We caught one person who did that with my business. We gave this one guy this full-time job and explained to him some days it'd be quiet, but you'll be on call. One day an emergency call came in and we couldn't get hold of him. Turns out he kept his old casual job and was still doing shifts. He didn't last long after that. In college, I had been dating a dude for several years. He had a sister who was an overnight nurse with a live-in boyfriend. Live-in boyfriend managed a large grocery store. I met up with a friend for lunch one day whose mom and her happened to work at the same grocery store in management. I said, "Oh, she must know John, my man's sister's live-in boyfriend." She said, "No, there is only one John and he's dating another manager at the store. They've been dating for several years." Well, turns out it was the same John. He was able to get away with it because of the overnight nurse aspect. Never invited her to company outings or holiday parties. Wouldn't be her friend on Facebook. Hindsight, but pretty crazy to be the one to navigate breaking that secret wide open. I was encouraged to be a part of the entire family dinner that included the disclosure. It really felt like an intervention. I didn't want to be. I was young and obedient. Oddly, the mom of my then boyfriend was rumored to be having a long-term affair with someone she worked under, so during dinner both her and the dad basically said they'll never bring it up again and pretend everything is fine if her decision was to stay with the guy. Thankfully, she wasn't an idiot and kicked him out, but I was questioning the reality I was in during that uncomfortable conversation. Oh. And the double-life grocery manager boyfriend, John, somehow talked the other woman into staying with him. My friend and her mom told her everything. She was shocked, but apparently forgave him at the time. We had neighbors who lived directly next door that we became great friends with. We had children together and almost an open-door policy of wandering into each other's homes. They were both really great people. His parents were great people who lived nearby. He seemed to be a good person raised by good people. Their daughter was 2 and our son was 3. We had fun together and pretty honest conversations about life. Or so we thought. Then, one night, the 4 of us are sitting on their back porch like we always do. Around midnight, the husband tells us they have some news to tell us. Wife looked clueless. He proceeds to say, "We are getting a divorce, and in a month I'm moving 5 states away. I've accepted a promotion, and I'm moving." My entire body went numb. What? Is this for real? The wife stayed calm the entire time and just went along with it, but we found out later that he had never told her they were getting divorced and that most of this was news to her and he just dropped it on her in front of us. What a nightmare. After this, she basically let us know how different he is behind closed doors. She showed us all these complicated spreadsheets he would put together for her to do house chores. She's a lawyer. She worked a job, just like his corporate ass. It was really upsetting for my husband and I because this was a couple that we identified with, and we were raising our kids together. And we found out that the husband was just a psychopath pretending to like all of us. Ultimately, they both moved. The husband and the wife are both remarried, and the wife is doing fantastic and married someone she knew from high school, and they have a pretty fabulous life. And the dad of the now teenager is basically a deadbeat, but sends the money. Cousin of mine started dating a guy who seemed nice enough, but was hesitant since she had bad luck with some past partners. Some other family members knew him when he was younger, said he was a nice guy, so she gave him a fair shot and they got serious. He had some past issues like bad credit, arrested a long time ago, for what she thought wasn't a big crime but never looked into it. A divorce with split custody of a kid, but ultimately nothing too concerning. Overall, though, he was nice to her, good job in the trades, etc. One day, cousin is at a party at the guy's house, and out of nowhere, SWAT rolls in with guns drawn and tells everyone to get down. They raid the house and ultimately found that he was in possession of weapons, with serial numbers scratched off, when he's a convicted felon with an armed robbery charge. He sat in jail for a while and needed my cousin to do a few things at the house, get some documents for his lawyer. She asks my mom to help her. They sign into his phone, what do you know? He was cheating on my cousin with his ex-wife, another woman. He was also sending them money and talking shit about my cousin to them. Needless to say, he just got out of jail. She broke up with him, LOL. Probably should have done a more thorough check on him. But it's hard when they seem nice enough and try to be overly honest about their past. Reminds me of my friend's brother-in-law. He was going through a divorce and moved back in with his mom, my friend's mother-in-law, who lived a few houses down from me. The guy was a professional chef, and I'd met him, his wife, and their kids several times at their family functions. I liked his wife and kids, but there was something about him. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I neither liked nor disliked him, if that makes sense. Anyway, one night I'd fallen asleep on my couch, which was right under my front window. At about 5 a.m., I was startled awake by the loudest banging I'd ever heard in my life. Turns out it was the DEA and FBI taking a battering ram to the mother's front door. Mr. Chef was apparently dealing drugs on the side. My friend was married to a man who traveled a lot for work for several years of their marriage. One day she was watching the news that had a live broadcast of a wounded soldier returning to his fiancée of several years. It was my friend's husband. He wasn't in the military, or wounded. And boy was he surprised that his future in-laws called the news station. He's in prison now. I don't know the details, but it had to do with defrauding the government, only very recently, but my grandmother. Currently, we are cleaning out my grandma and grandpa's house, as she passed away a few years ago, and he is now living in a home. While emptying out cupboards in their bedroom, my aunt and mother found a Ziploc bag of $6,000 in a handbag, and then $8,000 in a suitcase. There were also very detailed notebooks with people's names, money logs, and weights. We have no idea where the money came from, or why those details have been recorded. We can't ask my pops because unfortunately he barely remembers my mom some days, so it'll be a mystery in our family. My grandmother was in a very loving marriage with my grandfather, but we also found purses of money and a grab bag when going through her stuff after she passed. Like another commenter, I do think it was pretty common for that generation. My mom has always had running away money. Her childhood was deeply unstable, and her mother relied on a succession of men to support her and her kids. So even though my parents have been married 40-plus years, Mom still keeps cash secreted around the house. Funnily enough, though, she still has my dad do all the finances and bank accounts. He set up a couple that are entirely in her name, but she doesn't like dealing with them, LOL. My mom's in-home caregiver found $800 stashed in a bandage box. Thankfully, she was super honest and told us about it. That makes cleaning the house out after parents die very arduous. You have to look inside everything. Could the notebooks just be from Weight Watchers meetings and the money is an unrelated cash stash? It was common for women of that generation to hide cash in case they ever needed to leave the marriage. My grandma had a safe deposit box that my mom knew about and my granddad didn't. When she died, there was over $100K cash in there that she had hidden over the years. My wife's a casual prepper, not quite to the point of hoarding things, but she does things like canning and stocking up on non-perishables. I don't give her any hassle about it because there have been a couple times where the stockpile has helped us get through a crisis. Part of her prepping includes keeping a bug-out bag in the closet. It has a couple changes of clothes, an old pair of shoes, toiletries, photocopies of important documents. Basically, in the unlikely event that we have to get out of town now, she has a bag with everything she'll absolutely need. I wouldn't be surprised if she has a bit of cash socked away in there. Go through every book in the house. We found thousands when my great-grandmother passed away that way. Turns out after the Great Depression, she no longer trusted banks. Tangentially related, but this reminds me of a guy I knew. His grandmother used to always gift him a pack of fancy handkerchiefs every birthday and Christmas. He never used them, used to just give a half-hearted thanks. Well, one day he has a bad nosebleed and decides he has a use for a hanky after all. Takes one out of the box. Turns out his grandmother has been gifting him money hidden inside the hankies for years. He had to call her and tell her so he could thank her properly, as it was quite a tidy sum of money. When my grandma passed, we went to clean her house out and found around $25,000 squirreled away in old purses and suitcases. In one case, she even taped it to the back of a drawer. It was always in Ziploc bags with the amount written on the outside. My mom and aunts just split the cash evenly among us grandkids. My cousin bought the house once it was ready for sale, and he went to work renovating. Grandma had lived there for over 60 years and it needed some work. Cousin sent us all a text with a picture. He'd found another $15,000 behind the walls, and he split that cash up amongst us all, too. Cousin's a good dude. We'd have never known if he hadn't said anything. My mom and aunts all told us how Grandma was born and raised during the Depression. She was born in 1922, so the Depression really hit her family hard during her formative years. As a result, she was raised to never ever trust banks, so she always kept cash hidden around the house for emergencies. I guess my grandma had always told my mom and aunts to never trust the banks and always keep plenty of cash on hand, and they'd always just laugh it off. They expected to find money, but not that much. When my grandmother died, we found, tucked underneath the bottom of her jewelry box, a very old black and white photo of an extremely handsome young man whose first name was written in Ukrainian Cyrillic. We asked my mom if she knew of any relative with that name, but there weren't any. No clue to who the mystery man was. For what it's worth, I don't know or even really think that this was evidence of a double life. It could have been a beau who died young or the one who got away. But it's a mystery. There was also a cash stash under the mattress, but my grandmother was a child of the Depression, so this wasn't at all surprising. It was exactly enough that each great-grandchild got 100 from it. Found out that a successful man at my kid's private school actually had another family at the same school. Original wife apparently never knew. Kids found out when their mom accidentally died in her garage. He married the other woman a few weeks later. My cat. He was a neighborhood stray that started following us home during walks with our dog. Soon he started letting himself into the house when we'd come in from our walks, then spending the night. Then he started hanging out during the day and eating here, but still leaving whenever he pleased. Sometimes he'd leave for a day or two, but it still felt like he was here most of the time. One day he shows up injured. We took him to the shelter in case he was chipped. When we first met him, he had a flea collar on him. If he wasn't, we planned to formally adopt him. During the in-between weeks when the shelter healed him up and held him in case his original humans claimed him, the neighbors from across the street reached out to us. Their daughter was sad because they hadn't seen him in a long time. It turns out he was two-timing us. He was also letting himself into their house, eating there, and sleeping there. They also never fully took him in because they also thought he belonged to someone else. No one claimed him, so a few weeks later we formally adopted him. We now have joint custody with the neighbors, and he's a two-household cat with supervised outdoor time so that he doesn't show up with more surprise injuries. He has double the humans and double the dogs to bully. Can't imagine how a double life could have turned out better. Oh man, my street had a cat with 3 families. Same story. One family took him to the vet. Then they saw, "Have you seen our cat?" Posters up on poles. He would also visit me, but I knew he belonged to the first house. I had a cat that was like that. I would leave food out for him and let him inside when it was cold. Then one day, he showed up with a flea collar on. I thought, oh, he must have a home. So I asked the lady next door to me if he was hers. She said no, but that she left food out for him and let him inside when it was cold. So he had a third house. The lady ended up just keeping him once winter fully set in. To my knowledge, nobody ever came looking. Found out that someone within a friend group completely faked being a student at a relatively prestigious university in the area. Nobody had a clue. He basically came and hung out with people and pretended he attended classes. But actually he dropped out years ago and just pretended to be a student. He even pretended that he graduated and was at the graduation ceremony. My cousin essentially did this for about a decade. His dad, my uncle, was loaded and kind of naive, and he supported him most of that time between the ages of 18 and 27 and 28. He bounced around between several big universities and a couple smaller ones, living on or near campus and partying. Only ever attended for a semester or two at best, before he just stopped going to class and eventually flunk out, but would continue living in the area and hanging out with students, pretending he went there for a year or two. It was kind of a running joke in the family that my uncle was going to fund his lifestyle until he died, which is basically what happened. I dated a guy like this before. He was still deciding if he was going to graduate that semester when the deadline to register for graduation passed already. And every student would know from the millions of emails and signs around campus. Big liar. He also claimed to read the entire Bible in 6 hours. Ex of my best friend did this. He faked having graduated, having done a prestigious apprenticeship, and said he had a good job starting soon. My BF found out right before they were signing a lease on a rental. None of it was true. He'd been pretending to go schoolwork for the last 2 years. In reality, he was just sitting in a park waiting for the day to be over. Friend dodged a bullet there. Messed with his head, though. They were together for 7 years. My mom is 86. We found a bunch of journals that she wrote in shorthand. In the late 1950s, she worked as a call girl in Las Vegas. How did you translate the shorthand? A gentleman from England did it for us. They taught 2 different versions of shorthand in the U.S. It took over a year. I had an older relative who graduated from high school, went to secretarial school, and went to work at a company and was there for more than 50 years. When she finally retired, she decided she should get a computer and internet at home, since she did do some personal stuff from her work computer. After it was in, she was having a few problems, so I went over to give her a bit of a tutorial and some basic troubleshooting tips. She had grabbed a small notepad, and when she put it down next to the laptop, she had grabbed everything I had said in shorthand. It was funny when I pointed out to her how that moment was the perfect event to depict the entirety of her career. I learned Pitman shorthand in high school, 55 years ago. Now I work as a therapist and take some of my notes in shorthand, although I had to go online to refresh my memory of how to do it. It doesn't matter if I get it right, as long as I know what the squiggles mean. IRC. It was kind of common for secretaries to make some modifications based on personal preference for use. It wouldn't matter since the shorthand was just to take dictation, so as long as you could type it up as it was spoken, it was fine. My dad had a mistress for a decade or so and a secret child. After he'd been dead about 15 years, my teenage sibling reached out to my full sibling and me to let us know we had a half-sibling and see if we wanted to get to know each other a bit. To say this threw me for a loop is an understatement. My dad was an abusive asshole and an alcoholic. But after he'd been dead for so long, I figured I knew most of the stuff about him. It was like I time-traveled back to my high school years, and I remembered all these things I hadn't thought of in decades, like when I called him and he was drunk and there was a drunk woman talking loudly over him. I knew he was a cheater, but I didn't think he had anything long-term serious, and obviously I didn't know about any half-siblings, and I literally found out on my 6-month sober anniversary, ha. But I stayed sober. He messed us all up good and left a trail of destruction in his wake, but overall we're doing pretty well now. I've told this story on here before, but I met a guy on Tumblr, back when it didn't suck, who was working in the area as a contractor for the Army. We had a couple-week-long fling. Good company, great sex. When he was headed back to upstate NY, I said thanks and wished him well. He insisted this wasn't a fling, we could make it work. I was hesitant, but said we'd try. Long story short, after he was gone, I got the feeling he was married and started digging, but couldn't find evidence of his existence at all. Red flag. Then one day a friend wanted me to reinstall Snapchat. When I did, it imported my phone contacts, including his. His username was a little different. I Googled and up he came on what was then RateMyEx.com, which revealed his real name and the motherlode of info, including a military.com article. Not only was he still married, but that was his second wife, who he'd married while still married to wife 1. He'd dropped wife 1 and their 4 kids off his military benefits too. Doctored divorce papers to marry wife 2, and they now have 3 kids. Wife 1 had to sue him through military court over the benefits and to get a real divorce. That's the military article I found. I messaged him to congratulate him on actually surprising me. I'd expected him to be married, but bigamy was a fun twist. No response. Shocker. I then posted about him on Tumblr as a warning. I was part of the kink community, which is smaller than it might seem. The fucker liked the post. Several other women messaged me that they had either been involved with him or at least messaged with him. I'm still friendly with one of them. A work friend of mine just casually mentioned to a few of us on a lunch break about how he travels to South America every few months just to keep his wife there happy. He has a wife here who he has brought to company events. I was, and it was an extremely awkward moment after that. My aunt's husband was a traveling jewelry salesman. He had a second family in a faraway state. He had 7-year-old twin daughters when my aunt found out. My other aunt was married to a co-owner of a strip club. He was definitely a part of the mob. My dad is significantly younger than his siblings and remembers bullet holes in his car and helping him count cash. Then, one DY, he kicked my aunt and his 2-year-old daughter out for no apparent reason, I assume for their safety. He came to my cousin's wedding and told everyone there a different place for where he currently was supposedly living. On 2 different occasions now, I have dated women who told me after quite a while that they were cheating on someone else with me. I'm not sure what has made me attractive to people in relationships, and it's kind of troubling. It used to happen to me too when I was a bit younger. I hated it because I just don't like fucking people over like that. I can't speak for you or anyone else, but I'm pretty sure the reason it happened multiple times with me is because I was fun to be with and could connect with them really well, but I wasn't a serious person, and there was no illusion on their part about entering something serious with me. There was always this mystery about my grandfather suddenly leaving medical school and coming back to his tiny rural town in Wisconsin. This was in the early 1900s. Even as a child, I was keenly aware of my grandfather's sense of loss from that. But no one ever knew why he left med school, came home, married my grandmother, and built a life. Long after he passed, my father found out. He had a half-brother in the state he had gone to school at. My grandfather got a girl pregnant and ran off in the early 1900s. My grandpa's grandpa went to Austria to apprentice for a blacksmith, but had to flee the country in 1914. No, not because WD-1 was starting. He got his boss's daughter pregnant. It wasn't a secret, though. Apparently the entire village knew, and I found about it from my grandma. My coworker's devoted husband had a whole second family 3 states over. Found out when his business trip lined up perfectly with his other kid's soccer schedule on Facebook. Had an uncle. He was charming and clever. Thankfully, he never touched me, but my cousins. Did not find out until I got out of college. When he was finally caught, he was sent to prison in Alaska. All 3 of my cousins just slipped into such darkness that they fell into a meth crowd. Sometimes I wish I could see behind facades. Never knew who I was actually playing chutes and ladders with. My dad's dad sexually assaulted my aunt. Never met the guy, but several extended family members never cut ties with him because he was such a nice guy. I just couldn't see him doing that. It truly makes me think you never 100 know someone. I was talking to my dad, and he set his phone down face up and unlocked, and I saw some text messages sent between him and his mistress, as well as a picture of a woman, I'm assuming the mistress, going down on a man, I'm assuming my dad, shot from the man's perspective. It wasn't the first time we caught him cheating. Our dearest friend's son was in Boy Scouts 30 years ago, and he and his friend went on a camping trip. The friend's father was their Boy Scout leader and stayed in the same tent with the 2 boys. Turns out the scout leader was Herb Baumeister, the serial killer of many gay men he buried on his family property. Look up the Fox Hollow murders for details. My aunt was a stewardess in the 80s. She married a foreign businessman she met while working international flights. He seemed like a nice guy. They were married for like 12 years. I was traveling through Europe and was going to be in a city where he had an apartment, so I had planned to stay with him. Everything was fine, except he wasn't around much. He made some excuse about having to work a bunch. In the 10 days I spent there, Nee never slept at the apartment, and I only saw him for a couple hours every day. I was 17, and I guess my parents were under the impression my uncle was going to chaperone me. After I told them about my trip, my mom gave my aunt a ration of shit for letting me roam the streets for 10 days. My aunt went and had a fight with my uncle over it, and it came out that he didn't really live at the apartment. That was his mistress' shack up spot. He had a wife and children. My aunt was the mistress. My mom's boyfriend lived with my family for probably 6 years or so. In that time, he worked and went to school at night and got an MBA, and quickly got better and better jobs. Later on, after they broke up and he moved out, I found out he was selling drugs out of our house, did meth on occasion, if not more, and was not the person I thought he was at all. He went on multi-day benders, and once I had to track him down just to figure out where he was for his own mom. Turns out he was on a bend and crashing at this meth head's place who he was selling to, and he had hookers coming in and out nightly while he was out there. He was selling everything from weed to crack and going to these crazy parties that I had no idea about when I thought he was just a normal guy trying to make a better life for himself. I saw my high school English teacher out for dinner with my high school Spanish teacher. They were both married to other people. The next year, they both had gotten divorced and then married each other, so they had the same last name. Oh, you have Wilson for English? Who's your Spanish teacher? Mrs. Wilson. Cool. I found out later that their respective spouses had also gotten together, but not married at that point, and the four of them went on group dinners. I don't know if it's really a double life. Maybe. So my uncle, through marriage, way back, was part of the Winter Hill Gang, one of Whitey Bulger's thugs. He was married, had kids. They did not know his job, and he beat the shit out of people. Mentioned hanging someone into a furnace, had a stab wound in his back. I have no idea how much shit he actually did. So one day, he decides he doesn't want to kill anymore, leaves his family and takes off, divorces the wife. He meets my dad's sister somewhere. IDK. They get married. They have kids. The thing is, I live in the same neighborhood as his first family. Ugh. We know them. They're cool people. So his first kids hate him, right? Fucking hate him. I don't like him either. He's an asshole. And he's a fucking pastor. He became a pastor. The shit. The absolute shit. The most toxic men become pastors. My friend hurt her knee on a cruise ship. She had to get surgery and was laid up for a month or two. On Valentine's Day, her husband of 3 years abandoned her, took all their money, and locked her out of every account. She sued him and won, but he totally changed his name and went on to become a pastor. UTF, my sociopathic, domestic abusing, murder attempting, STD spreading father counseled people at church. The irony, edit, I misremembered and so made a correction. Oh, and on the topic of double lives, his own dad was a horrid piece of shit, and I almost certainly have half aunts and half uncles I'll never meet. Back in the early 90s, I was about 6, and a nice family with 2 little girls moved into the neighborhood. I was thrilled to have a playmate close to home, and even more thrilled when the youngest girl joined my grade. Naturally, our parents spent time with their parents and hung out during our playdates. The family appeared wealthy and was a bit overgenerous, offering gifts and inviting us along to expensive outings. Around this time, a series of violent bank robberies hit my tiny, peaceful country. They were an organized gang, and the violence was shocking and unprovoked. I seem to remember they shot security guards before even making demands. My family was terrified when the gang hit our small local bank. It made no sense. A friend of the family had been about to exit her parked car at the bank when she heard gunshots and was forced to cower in fear, ducking into the car's footwell as best she could. This sort of thing was unheard of in our town. All the adults were scared. It wasn't long before my 2 playmates and their parents disappeared, and not long before their dad's face was on the newspaper. The bank robbing gang had been tracked down by a toll booth receipt left behind in a rental car. It was my friend's dad and his friend, and the mother was well aware. They'd fled their own country for similar crimes, apparently. My mom always said my dad got a weird vibe from them. They were vague about their past, their jobs, and a bit too invested in keeping up appearances. I always wondered what happened to the 2 little girls. I remember we used to play princess dress-up, and one day they lent me a pair of gold ballerina flats I absolutely adored. Their mother laughed and said I could keep them. My mom frowned when I came home with them and wanted to wear them everywhere. She said gold shoes were tacky. As an adult, I have a special fondness for gold shoes and have bought a pair or 2 over the years. A man messaged me and told me his fiancée and my boyfriend were on a secret trip away together under the guise of work. He'd become suspicious and read her emails. When that was uncovered, we both discovered they had a secret flat together. Fun. My mom found out she had an older half-brother she didn't know about for 60-plus years. For context, her dad, my grandfather, a professional musician, got a woman pregnant when he was serving in World War II. He was also married to my grandmother at the time. In the mid-2000s, a family friend read a magazine article featuring a pro guitarist who said he found out at the age of 19 that his bio father was my grandfather. The family friend shared the article with my mom. The siblings met eventually and were part of each other's lives until he passed away. He even added her to his will. The really unfortunate thing is my grandmother learned her husband was indeed unfaithful. But since he'd abandoned her with 3 teenagers in the 1960s, it wasn't that shocking. Still, it stung. P.S. To this day, my mom doesn't want to do ancestry. She doesn't have the capacity to deal with any more half-siblings. My grandmother had a secret husband. She was a public heath doctor, going from town to town, doing vaccinations at schools, shutting down restaurants for health violations, testing tap water, among other things. She was a busy, important person with a loving husband, Bert, who was an anesthesiologist, and 3 grown sons, and they lived in the city. Her other husband, Jim, was previously widowed and lived a few towns over and was a car salesman. Jim had 3 teenage sons. My grandfather, Bert, bought a car off of Jim, and they started talking about their wife. And you can guess what happened. After the epic court battles, my grandmother moved penniless to Juneau. My grandpa and Jim became close and spent Christmases together with their boys for decades. My father always acted like the perfect saint. He always stood in judgment of us all. That was wrong. I learned that my father planned to run off with his mistress and had proposed to her while still married to my mother. He planned to get control of all of the accounts, throw our family out of the house with nothing, and then move his mistress and her kids into the house. The mistress would have gotten everything, and we would be on the street. He got caught because I noticed it was odd that a married man would work till 9 on a Friday while his wife was out of town. I told my mother this, and she started digging. And she found so much. When confronted about all of this, he claimed the first mistress was only a fantasy, and he would never have thrown us out. My mother discovered that he had changed his life insurance policy to go to the mistress. He had also planned to get the car and house titles for her. My mother kept working on this and found so much. Come to find out, he had been a cheating dirtbag long before this mistress. By my count, he had around 12 affairs with different women over the 40 years he's been married to my mother. And those are just the ones I knew about. We knew about none of this. He claimed it was an accident that he had been with these women. The best part was that one of the affairs was with my mother's sister. He had planned to run off with her, and my father had kept a love note my aunt had sent him. So that one was confirmed. This one is just a theory of mine, but I'm almost certain my cousin, the cheating aunt's kid, is actually my half-brother. He's completely different from the other cousins and looks virtually identical to my brother. That's something I also need to worry about. TLDR. My saint of a father was really a cheating dirtbag who planned to throw me out of my house, and my cousin is almost certainly my half-brother. When I lived in San Francisco's Tenderloin district about 20 years ago, a well-loved actor would come through in the dead of night to buy rocks. Sometimes the dealers would make him do bits before they sold to him. It was really sad, but there was also a wall next to a 7-Eleven a lot of street kids hung out at. He would always buy them food and talk to them and was very kind. You would not have thought that looking at this actor. In fact, in interviews he said he'd been clean since the 80s. I always wondered what type of pain he had that he would continuously haunt back streets like that late at night and hang with street kids rather than sleep or be with his family. But very, very kind man. Great listener. An ex-co-worker, EMS, is a famous and well-known porn actress. She used her full legal name and did MILF and stepmom POVs for free on PH, and actively worked as a paramedic using the same name. Don't Google your co-workers' names. Ha ha ah ha ah. At my last job during a Zoom call, we did an icebreaker, 2 truths and a lie. And a colleague I hadn't met in an office across the country included, I'm a best-selling author. And it turned out to be the truth. What she didn't mention was that she wrote the smuttiest of smut. When we Googled the pen name she wrote under, it immediately pulled up a zillion books with half-naked men and women on the covers. Watching all of my co-workers' faces on this Zoom call as they each made this discovery was fucking hilarious, LOL. I actually had 2 co-workers who did porn. One did it under a screen name and was faceless, but the other was completely shameless, LOL. And I'm not sure about the correlation. Maybe low wages. I have a very reserved colleague who has the same name as a former French porn actress who writes and produces yoga and wellness content under her real name. The age doesn't match, and confusion is impossible. But she has to deal with surprise when she gives her name. It's quite surprising to see how many people remember the name of a porn actress who hasn't been active for almost 20 years. Years ago, I worked for a major retail store. Girl got hired and was in her first month, still going through new hire training. She was really nice. Then word got around that she was in some porn. That shit spread like wildfire throughout the staff, everyone sending links to her vids. She ended up quitting. This was around 2009, and I still feel bad for her. Aw, this makes me sad. I worked with a girl who did porn to pay for culinary school, and she was really talented, in both industries, and was just stunningly beautiful on top of it. Fine dining doesn't have a lot of women in the back of the house, so she was a novelty right away. All us girls in the restaurant always banded together to be supportive of one another, and at the end of the day, the whole restaurant genuinely cared about each other, so it's not like anything crazy was happening. One day before work, my boyfriend, I know, sends me a link to a porn video, and it was her. I was angry with him for numerous reasons, but a big one was that he had sent it to all the guys we worked with that weren't management too. I felt so disgusted by him and felt so bad for her. I guess when she got hired, she was honest with the exec and sous chef about what she had done to put herself through school, and they were super understanding about it to her face, but didn't have her back when the rest of the team found out. When she found out that everyone else knew, she didn't raise a fuss or blame anyone, but did bring it to management's attention that porn was being shared and watched by staff members on the clock, and they handles it like total douchebags. I caught some heat for throwing my boyfriend under the bus for being the one sending the video out. That relationship ended very soon after, but she just quietly put in her 2 weeks and ensured that she had some solid recommendations to move forward in her culinary career after HR ripped everyone apart for sharing porn on work phones during work hours, especially because it involved a member of the team. I know that there's the whole, don't put it out there for the world to see if you don't want the world to see, but morally, I just don't agree with that. And I think my ex was a shady dirtbag foe sending out her videos like that. It was wild because you would never have guessed that she had ever worked in the adult industry. I kept in touch with her for a bit after she left the restaurant. IDK if she stayed with culinary or went back to adult entertainment because we mostly just talked music aside from usual, "Hi, how are you? I miss you" convos. Wherever she is, whatever she's doing, I hope she's doing well, and I hope that never happened to her ever again. I am from a pretty rural area. When I was a teen, we had a guy in our friend group who was house-sitting for his uncle. He told us we were all allowed to stay over for the weekend during summer. Uncle was super chill and let use his kitchen, cars, grill, swimming pool, everything. Yeah, it turned out Uncle didn't even know nephew was staying over while he was away. 2 friends of mine were charged for joyriding, but charges were dropped when it became clear that they really had no clue. Parents were friends with a younger couple. They never got out to do much because the husband worked in nautical repairs engineering for the Coast Guard. They had 1 car, lived out in the middle of nowhere, and the wife was stranded because he took the car up and down the coast repairing vehicles. The flip, the dude actually made incredible money. It was just spread thin between his 2 families. He has a second family, kids. It was wild. I was 14 when this happened and didn't know this was something humans could do. Great-grandpa had 3 kids, grandma being one of them. On the other side of the city, he had GF and fathered 1 more. What made it worse, she would press and iron all of his clothes to go down the club and shoot pool, when in reality, he was with his other family. Finally, my great-grandmother divorced him in 1950s, and she raised 3 girls as a single mom on a waitress salary. 70 years later, my mom is ancestry. Common finds out he had a son my grandmother's age that he never met. My mom matched as a potential cousin. After connecting some dots, it was confirmed. Guy was not a great man. Not necessarily a huge thing, but in the early 2000s, I found out that my very soft-spoken history teacher was also like a well-regarded ventriloquist that would spend his whole summers touring the U.S. Not me, but my parents. They rented their old condo to a woman, and it turned out she had stolen her ex-wife's identity and was literally pretending to be her on a day-to-day basis. She had been romancing various women, moving in with them and stealing a bunch of their shit, including their identity, before disappearing again. She had done this in multiple states and even had a warrant out for her arrest. She had 2 teenage daughters who she had trained on how to help hide their mom's real identity if people came asking about her. My dad figured out she was working at a dentist's office and also stealing the identities of various patients, which led to my dad tipping off her employer, and she got arrested while she was at work. The dentist who owned the practice was even nice enough to record her getting arrested and sent the video to my dad as a thank you for tipping him off about her scheme. Back as a teen, I spent a couple of weeks at my aunt's uncle's place. They moved their son to the basement and had me in his upstairs bedroom next to the 2 girls. I got bored and got digging around, nosy I know, and found a stash of panties, a bra, and a 2-piece bathing suit. I confronted him. He cried and admitted he stole them to wear them. He didn't know why. I asked if he knew who they belonged to. They were random grabs from bags. He didn't know. I told him it was damn creepy. He had to stop stealing. I told him if he agreed to stop, I'd buy him something. I had a credit card by that point. Dad checked the statement monthly, so he knew what I spent. I used some of my clothing budget to buy my cousin a couple of panties and a lingerie bra. He was really happy. I did not ask to see him in them. I have no idea what happened after that. My cousin hasn't come out as gay, trans, or a cross-dresser. He seems to be a fairly normal guy. Found out the reason for my co-worker's first divorce was because he embezzled and defrauded his company for millions. I knew him when he was married to his second wife, his high school sweetheart. She apparently never got over him and took him in when he was out of the clink. As a felon, he was unemployable. He worked in the legal field so truly that option was truly dead. His second wife supported him and bankrolled several self-employment ideas, one of which was actually quite successful. The rest were glorified hobbies, and basically as long as he broke even, she didn't even care. Couldn't have had a cushier situation. Several years after we stopped working together, I noticed he went from being a daily Facebook poster to going completely silent. I asked another former co-worker who told me he and his second wife had split. He apparently had a whole-ass second family in another country. He's married to her. She looks about half his age, and they have multiple kids together. Marriage is a contract subject to the laws of a country, but the access to information about marriage status is limited to the jurisdiction of that country. There is no international register of marriages that countries can update and cross-check, or international agreements to allow officials in different countries to exchange this sort of information. The most a civil office can do is check within its national registers about a person's identity and marital status. The rest is just based on the assumption that people tell the truth. Well, surprise. Edit some rephrasing for clarity regarding jurisdiction so that it's not misunderstood that marriage is null abroad. One of my best for like 2 decades, starting in 5th grade, always had an absent father. Like, her parents were married, a beautiful house, the whole shebang. But I think I met him only after a few years because he was always off working somewhere else as somewhat successful OB-GYN who also did surgeries. We were so close, they even took me on week-long vacations during summer holidays, which was also basically the only time I saw him. He wasn't even around for all birthdays, Christmas, etc. One day we were having brunch and my friend told us he had finally opened his own practice with someone he knew since they went to university. We Googled their practice, super fancy for early 2010s homepage, some newspaper articles about the opening, one of which introducing her father and his co-worker as married couple who moved to Psy with their 5 children. My friend broke down. Long story short, it's all true. Her mother knew. It had been ongoing for like 20 years at that point. The deal was she got the house, the name, the benefits, and the holidays. The other woman got him 90 off the time. He even got them the same wedding bands. That was like 8 years ago. It's all crumbling apart now. He's seriously sick, has officially divorced my mom, and married the other wife for tax purposes. Reasonable. A while ago. Now my friend's mom is in serious financial trouble, has not seen him in months. It's heartbreaking. Like, she has the house and a small pension, but that's it. She would have to sell her home of nearly 40 years to make ends meet. But she doesn't. So my friend has gone into debt to support her financially. Just a sad mess. My friend's mom died. She was a hoarder. I helped them deal with the house, and that was a world unto itself. Her husband's business was largely in Asia, and there was nowhere for him in the home anyway, so he was rarely there, and when he came, he stayed with a relative. Same with my friend, who also didn't live there full-time because they were in grad school in another state. I had a really hard time believing the dad would just let the wife he loved live like that, and asked my friend, "Are you super duper for sure certain your dad doesn't have a secret family in Asia?" And they were like, "No, dude, my dad loves my mom too much to do that." He did, though, a woman wife and 2 sons. He eventually came out of the closet, as it were, and tried to have them live in the United States. It was a failed experiment, and they all went back to Asia, and my friend is an orphan, basically. My former stepfather cheated on his ex-wife to be with my mom at a time when my mom left my entire extended family behind. The ex-wife successfully sued my mom for every penny she had, essentially damning my family into paycheck-to-paycheck financial instability for multiple years. My former stepfather hid all sorts of relationships over the 13 years he was married to my mom. About 3 years into the marriage, my mom found out that he had another former wife and child before his ex-wife. The worst was how we found out towards the end of the marriage to my mom that he proceeded to balance up to 6 other girlfriends at a time for the entire 13-year marriage, while spending every dime from every paycheck on stupid shit, like an iPhone upgrade for himself, further worsening our financial situation. He once used my college photo on Tinder to try and catfish more women. He would blame all of his decades of bad behavior on his sex addiction and bipolar disorder. He voted for George W. Bush twice in support of the sanctity of marriage. He was so ashamed with himself that he moved to the farthest possible U.S. state from where we live. Good riddance. The state of North Carolina has an old-timey traditional marriage law known as alienation of affection that has since failed to be repealed by the conservative legislature here. It allows a one spouse to sue the dating partner of the other spouse. Essentially, it heavily punishes anyone who dates someone who is already married, whether or not the new dating partner is aware of the marriage at all. If someone claims to be separated from their spouse, but a divorce is not finalized, then the other spouse can sue for emotional damages. Former contact at a customer of mine. He was C-suite. Quiet guy, kept to himself and really didn't open up to people at all, but we got along really well, and he would talk to me about personal stuff. He lived with his girlfriend of a few years. I met her when we went out to lunch one day when she was off work and joined us. I knew he typically flew down to TX a couple long weekends a month. Go in to visit him one day about an upcoming project we were working on, and he had just gotten back from vacation. He excitedly proceeded to show me pics from his trip to Mexico, with his wife and kids who live in his other house in TX. A friend of mine was in a 3-year relationship, starting to have talks about engagement, moving in, etc. Found out the fucker had a 5-year-old kid with another woman. Tried to lie about it when confronted. His family didn't know, apparently. He was also not paying support, but still having sex with the baby mama ran into my regional manager at a party. No big deal, right? Well, he was in full drag, drunk and leading a gimp around by the collar. I didn't recognize him at first, but then I heard his voice. I snapped my head around and called out his name. He spun around and locked eyes with me. He walked over in his best supermodel walk and said, "What you want, bitch?" The realization dawned on him, and before he could spiral out, I assured him I wasn't going to say anything, and then the gimp talked. "Thanks, man." Took me a second, but I recognized the voice. It was my supervisor. I knew he was gay, but the whole gimp suit was a shock. I assured them again I wouldn't say a word. Had a pretty good time with the drag queen and gimp for the next few hours. In college, I was visiting my then-girlfriend over the summer, and her dad, who was a truck driver, came home with a young boy who called him Dad. He insisted he was babysitting a friend's kid, but my girlfriend's mom knew what was up. Called him out on his BS, and it all unraveled while I was there. He wasn't a good dad or husband. They got divorced. and less than a year later he passed away from a heart attack. Both families attended the funeral. This actually happened to me 2 months ago. I was in a situationship with a man I met at work for 2 years. 2. I was head over heels for him. Dates, gifts. We spent the holidays together, talked every day, had a lot of trust issues because he was cheated on multiple times in the past, always suspicious I was messing with other people. Could never make up his mind on if he wanted something more with me. One day we went to the movies together. As we are walking out the theater, this group of girls walk up to us. It is his girlfriend of 1 year and her friends. She had a feeling something was wrong that night, went by the theater and saw his car and waited for him to come out. I had no idea the whole time. I've never felt so hurt and shocked by someone before. It's like this person I knew for 2 years never existed. Best part? His girlfriend forgave him. So now they are in a one-sided, open relationship. He gets to fuck other women. She gets to fuck no one. Imagine hiding your double life for over a year and then just get permission to keep fucking doing it. Insane. I recently found out that my friend was an actor on the side for years now. Nobody in our friend group knew, not even the people who knew him since they were toddlers. We found out through one of us browsing around one night and finding a random viral clip of him in one of those crappy YouTube Instagram memes. It was from a series called Tomorrow's Teachings, which is a series that's kind of problematic, so he's a little ashamed of it in hindsight, which is why he didn't tell us he was doing this. He's still best known for that clip. Apparently, it's permeated through his entire social circle at this point. The actual story of him becoming an actor isn't crazy or anything. Turns out that the crappy meme was his first role that he did, because a friend asked him to fill in. He found out he liked acting through that, went to acting school, and now he's in a few shorts. Our friend group still lost our shit for a week straight over this fact, though. I used to be a bellman at a luxury hotel in San Francisco. There was a high-powered businessman who would stay with us 6 or 7 times a year on business trips. He would frequently talk about his wife back home and his adult children. About the 3rd time I met him, he asked me to bring up his other suitcase, which was stored in the bell closet, and according to my coworkers had been for at least a decade. About an hour later, he came down to the lobby in full leather, boots, pants, and bare-chested with a harness. He met a group of similarly dressed 20-something men out front and disappeared into the night. In mid-2000s and 2010s, I worked for a major bank. I was shocked at how many men had second families that we usually discovered when one of the poor, unsuspecting wives would call us after coming across banking paperwork that didn't match any of their family's accounts, but was in her husband's name. She would be confused, call the bank wanting to know what was going on. I'd be able to see exactly what was going on, straight away, but wouldn't be able to say anything to the wife because her name wasn't on the account, etc. So I'd just have to assure her it was a legitimate account and gently advise her that she might like to discuss this account with her husband. Oof. Found out my mom was into scammers summer of 2021. Only found this out due to her taking my money from a joint account. She gave her retirement money away, now has none. She continues to do this, so she must continue to work. She is widowed and 78 years old. How she thinks she's helping people is beyond me. I run across people like that not infrequently. I can't tell if they like to get ripped off or if something is just missing in their brain. I read that the Nigerian Prince email has obvious mistakes in order that only the easiest to scam people will respond. My friend had a neighbor who's a pedophile and had child pornography on his computer. Caught him taking picture of my goddaughter. I called the police and they arrested him. My friend has security cameras and they clearly showed him pointing a camera at my goddaughter. Dude was on parole and got sent back to prison for 20 years. Before some smart ass comes in here and says something like, actually the max for child pornography is only like 15 years and can get out on good behavior after 12. The reasons it was 20 was because he violated his parole multiple times. First off, my friend and her family live across the street from an elementary school. And I don't mean like, Oh, you can walk to the school. I mean, the back of their house is facing the school, and he was their next-door neighbor. Second thing he did was falsify documents about his home and neighborhood. He submitted a document that shows he was staying with family nowhere near a school. Also, the family that claimed he was staying with them also got charged with lying to police and falsifying documents. Since when you stay with family while on parole, the family also has to sign a document that they are in agreement with that individual staying with you. Third thing he did, or rather not do, was he missed 4 mandatory appointments with his parole officer. Last thing he did was attempt to purchase a firearm while on parole. My cousin, who I grew up with and was very close to, turned out to be a child predator. They actually tracked him and caught him with an undercover agent posing as a 13-year-old girl who he sent photos to and solicited photos from. So his car breaks down one morning on the way to work, the cops show up, and oh, by the way, you saved us a trip, we were going to arrest you tomorrow. Shocked the whole family. It just wasn't in character for him, or so we thought. I went to part of his trial and was shocked by what the prosecution presented. It was very different than what he had told me when it all first started. He's doing 8 years and has lost everything. They asked us to write character references to try to lessen his sentence, and after reading them, the prosecutor said, "This man has been living a double life that none of you could have ever imagined." That hit home for me. Had a male relative always bestow us with lavish gifts and trips and experiences, and always thought of him as a very wealthy and giving person. He got sick and died pretty young. And come to find out, not only was he not wealthy, he was actually so far in debt he had a second mortgage on his home and had over $100K in debt just to his sick 80-plus-year-old mother. This doesn't include the other less harmful ways he hurt the family. Consider the illusion completely shattered. I am adopted. When I first found my biological mother's side, I did a bit of digging. I found out that my biological grandfather was stationed in Los Angeles during the Korean War. He got married to a Jewish girl. His family was Catholic. 2 years later, he is back home and got married to bio-grandma. I have a gut feeling that he just left California and never divorced the first wife. When he filled out the marriage license with bio-grandma, he gave his age as 1 year older. The first wife left California and moved to a different state, and also got married again 2 years later. My ex-wife lived a double life for months. The job, she said, she had only lasted a few weeks, but for over 4 months, she pretended she still worked there. She'd wake up early, leave before I did, and drive off like normal. Most days she circled back home, sat around, or ordered DoorDash, sometimes 2 meals or more in a day. Since I came home midday to drop off my son, she'd actually leave the house again so we wouldn't cross paths. Because she quit the job, she let our health insurance lapse but said nothing. Instead, she siphoned money from my account to cover it and maxed out a credit card. I only caught on when I casually asked her for $200 and when she was getting paid. She dragged it out for days before finally admitting the truth. HR even confirmed to me she hadn't worked there in months. I suggested she get help, and that our son should stay with my family until she was more stable. The very next day, she filed for divorce, and hit me with a bogus PFA, protection from abuse order. She dropped it in a week, even telling my father we could stay together if I wanted, but by then, I knew it was over and went through with the divorce. In my hometown, one of the school districts has 2 high schools. When I was in high school, one of the older guys I looked up to was this straight-laced, extremely polite 4. Ex-GPA debate team champion who ended up at West Point. We all called him by his last name, Pito. I was at a party my junior year and met this girl who was telling us about her boyfriend, Eno Sanal, and the drinking and partying they get up to. Later, she refers to him as Inichown or P-chow, and I'm like, no way. Couple months later, I'm hanging out with him one-on-one and ask him about it. Turns out it's true, he lived near enough to both high schools that he had friends from both. For his actual high school, he was super academic, but he'd party and go hard with drinks, drugs, sex with his friends at the other high school. I was in awe. A student found out her dad had a wife and 3 kids in a different country. He was married to the student's mom here in the U.S. and had 6 kids here too. This was over a decade ago. I think about that kid a lot. A colleague of mine is researching her family tree, and she discovered her grandfather secretly had 2 families. The even weirder thing is he gave both sets of children the same names. My dad's cousin, I'll call her Sue, who was living in the UK. She'd been born and raised in Australia. We're from NZ. We visited Sue when I was young, pre-DNA tests and internet. Sue was catching up with Dad on family history and was a bit confused about things. Dad, unknowingly, revealed to Sue that her father has been married to Sue's mother's sister in NZ and had a family. He left that marriage, ran off with the sister, who became Sue's mother, and had another family. Sue had cousins, also half-siblings, that she'd never known about. Dad and Sue have both passed away, and I wish I knew what happened after. Not me, but a family member. When her grandmother was getting quite old and she casually let it slip, that her dad wasn't her real dad. For 55 years, she had no idea that her mom had gotten pregnant by the dad of the family she babysat for as a teenager. This entire comment section could inspire so many Don Draper spin-offs. My family found out about my grandfather's post-Second World War frolicking, which ended up with him marrying my grandma only, because she was the first of at least 2 women that gave birth within weeks of each other. The other woman was my grandma's best friend until she passed away a few months before my grandpa. We found out because after his death, and my grandma's, a half-uncle no one knew about contacted us. He looks like a carbon copy of my grandpa. Looking into his many diaries, my dad and uncles realized that this self-righteous military man had spent his entire life sleeping with all my grandma's friends, while outwardly despising anyone in the family who had any sort of extramarital or even intramarital drama. It's always projection. He was always a good grandpa to me and my siblings, but fuck you, Gramps, you were an asshole son of a bitch to everyone except your grandkids. His wife, kids, and friends all got fucked over by this dickhead during his entire life, and he kept proud and detailed records of it all. My dad and uncle trashed all those diaries to spare the rest of us from the heinous details. I once discovered my cat was living a double life. We thought he was ours until a neighbor posted pictures of their cat on Facebook. Turns out he had a whole second family down the street, complete with a different name and extra meals. He still shows up for dinner at both houses. My coworker thought her uncle worked a boring office job for the government. When he died, found out he was in the CIA. Decades ago, right out of college, I interviewed for a job with the CIA. During one of the trips to Washington to meet with the people that I'd actually be working with, a guy told me that if anybody asked what I did for a living to just tell them I was a federal accountant, because nobody wants to talk about accounting. The position I was applying for was almost as mundane as an accountant, not a spy or anything like that. I'd have been at a desk in an office near a strip mall all day long. This guy I know was traveling to this random island in the Caribbean where he had his way with children, but he only did it because he was an informant for the FBI. My boyfriend of a year and a half, he was living with a woman the whole time with their 2 kids and also had 4 more kids he'd left with his ex. Somehow only remembered to tell me about 2 kids. I went out for Chinese food with my mom. I was in grade 7 or 8, so still a kid. While we were seated, we noticed one of my best friends from school's father sitting a few tables away with someone who was very much not my friend's mom. They were very comfortable together. I dated a guy for about 6 months, and neither of us planned to get serious. I was catching feelings, so I told him it was cool if we stopped or decided to allow feelings, but unfortunately it was one or the other for me at that point. He agreed to having feelings. Another 6 months or so pass and we have a conversation about how we aren't going to see other people at all anymore. I suspect he didn't stop, so I pry a bit and he admits he didn't and that he is a bit of a cheater. Ah. Okay, well, I appreciate honesty. Because of this, he is thrilled, and my name gets out as being with him. Few more months go by and I start running into women everywhere that he is dating. Within a few months, out of morbid curiosity and actually asking around, I had personally spoken to nearly 20 women who had various forms of relationships with this man during the time I did. About 10 knew they were fuck buddies, but nearly half thought they meant something to each other and hung out at least once a week. That's not the end of this story, nor the total number of women by the time it was over, but it tells enough. We were in our early and mid-30s, and the women were aged early 20s to late 40s. My homie quit his big fancy medical job to clean floors instead, because he was tired of thinking. Didn't tell his wife for like a year I've posted one about my friend, but I also have another. I'm in Australia, became friends with an Irish backpacker, still are friends to this day. She told me about her brother, so when they were young teens, their mother passed away from cancer. Years later, her brother told everyone, including her and the family, that he had brain cancer, and it was terminal. Turns out he was lying. He shaved his head, lost weight, faked vomiting and being sick for years. They lived in a small Irish village, and the community all helped out with money and food. Turns out he lied about it all and never had cancer. He tried it again a year or so later, saying he was telling the truth this time. It was a lie, again, of course. He still lives in the village, and of course is now ostracized. Apparently every now and then he will make up another fake sickness. Lived with a boyfriend for 2 years, including a cross-country move together. Found text messages on his phone with another woman. Turned out he was engaged to her. She lived in another state that he regularly traveled to for work. No idea if the work travel was actually legit or if he was just visiting her. In retrospect, he'd go to the gym a lot but wasn't actually in very good shape. That's when he'd call her. Also, he said he was going to a therapist to work on issues we'd discussed. He was also talking to her during that time. He never had a therapist. I moved out immediately and told her that he had a GF in hopes that I'd save her some trouble too. Maybe 18 mo's later, this woman sent me a FB message to tell me he'd done the same to her. She stayed with him BC. He said I was his crazy ex who couldn't get over him. Fun side. Fact, this woman was high in Trump's first administration. I am a lifelong Democrat, so when her name started showing up in the news, I was floored. My best friend in high school fell in love with a guy I was cool with online. This was 2006, 2007-ish. They were in a relationship and all, and turns out the guy was fake, and it was a girl she was friends with. This girl was a stud who had a baby and wasn't aware until she gave birth. Only reason my friend found out she was living this double life was because while at the mall with said friend, my best friend was carrying the baby's bag, and she found the extra phone that girl was communicating with her through. Crazy story. My husband didn't know he had a half-brother until he was invited to half-brother's wedding. Same dad and my husband's mom knew, but apparently dad's ex-wife, half-brother's mom, was super manipulative and possessive and wouldn't allow her son and my husband to grow up knowing the other one existed. Weirdly, both my uncle and my high school best friend's stepfather admitted to, within years of each other, despite not knowing each other and living in different U.S. states, having secret families in China they'd started while away on business trips. My best friend's stepfather reconciled with her mother after he renounced that family, but my uncle left my aunt and their son and moved to China to be with his Chinese family. My ex was a religious leader. I'm being vague for legal reasons. Over the top, I love my wife in person. I assumed his abuse in private was either my fault or just the way he was. Most of it was not physical abuse. He was very good at convincing me I was the problem, despite the fact that I am an accomplished scholar in my field. He wanted to handle our finances, and I grudgingly allowed it. I worked during HS and university as the bookkeeper for a small business, so I had a lot of experience paying bills and sticking to a budget. After more than 15 married young, I found out he had spent more than $250,000 on pornography and camming sites in the preceding 2 years. He had been severely financially abusing me, demanding my income, blaming me for financial issues, for years. I never even knew he looked at porn, let alone stuff like that. He traveled a lot for work, and in general, I respected his privacy, because he often didn't respect mine. But his demeanor also never told me he was hiding anything like this. I found out that he committed serious crimes against me to steal more money for cam girls. The post-separation abuse is on another level, still going through it. Found out when I was 33 my dad had an entire second life. He lived with multiple other women and was the reason I never saw him as a kid. I'm pretty sure I have a half-sister thanks to one 10-year affair. The saddest part of it all is my mom was married to him for 25 years and pieced it all together at the end. She took her life after enduring 25 years of emotional abuse from him. Her suicide made 0 sense when it happened 14 years ago, as she was the happiest person I knew. Come to find out over a decade later what I now know, I'm not sure how she survived all those years being treated the way she was by him. He's estranged now from all 3 of his children, grandchildren, and his current wife has 0 clue who he really is. I've thought about blowing up his life and telling her, but she will find out eventually. A narcissist will never change. My friend Twigs had a friend named Jim. They worked in the oil patch in Wyoming. Jim was strange, aggressive, and moody. One day, he vanished. After 3 years, he turned up riding a cobbled-together, beat-to-death Harley. His helmet had red and blue plastic-lensed cardboard 3D movie glasses taped to it for goggles. All completely junk. He was looking for Twigs at the racetrack we were competing at. Twigs went and talked to him away from us. After a few minutes, Jim rode off. Then Twigs told us the story that none of yous knew of how Jim had killed a doppelganger with no relatives or family a few years' age and assumed his identity. To get away from the law for dope and gun running. Except the police were still after Jim. They were looking for him when he had disappeared 3 years ago and were hounding him now. Twigs had just told him the police had been to his house looking for him. Actually a lie, but Jim never came back. If anyone looked like they were running on the ragged edge, it was Jim, knew a kid from college, graduated, met more friends, found out from a new friend that said college friend, who got married and was living all the trappings of married life, was having an affair with a co-worker of my new friend. Wild bonus college friend and new friend lived across the country. Newsflash. America can be small, especially if you go or matriculate in certain universities. College friend is still married to his wife, appears to be happily married to his wife, but I knew that affair partner knew a lot about his marriage. College friend was not kind to his wife. Still weirds me out that he pretends to be the perfect husband, and I randomly know he cheated for years on his wife. But they have so much money, I chalk it up to a very real White Lotus Season 2 kind of relationship. Good friend of the family. Spent a lot of time with my family. We spent time with his family. He started dating one of our best friends. We were super close. Then, he and our friend broke up, no big deal. He went quiet for a bit, but nobody thought anything. A few months later, he lost a parent and a few other close family members, all within a 45-day period. A couple months after that, he was killed at his home by law enforcement. Turns out he caught a case for child pornography, was found guilty and didn't go his sentencing, as that was when his father was being buried. Never turned himself in afterwards. His employer found out. He was not able to work. His bank account was frozen. Law enforcement finally came looking for him. Nobody really knows how it exactly went down, but he was killed in some sort of standoff. I did an internship for Disney back in my early college years. It was basically just very cheap labor. You didn't learn much. But there were Facebook groups for the interns to join. I met a guy on there. We went on a date and became a couple. He was a little weird, and I eventually ended things with him. One thing I found weird was that as soon as I dumped him, he was asking me to hook him up with people. I was just like, WTF, no. But the more people I talked to about him, the more said, oh yeah, he hit on me. Oh yeah, he asked me out. I saw the dates on some of these interactions, and they occurred while he and I were dating. I called him out for this when he messaged me one night on Facebook, leading him to block me. A couple of months later, still doing the internship, and I see someone asking about the dude on Yik Yak, the OG back in the early days, not whatever nonsense it is now. Someone else says he quit and went home early. We worked in 2 very different locations, not even the same role, so I had heard nothing. I asked around. Turns out a bunch of girls outed him on Facebook for what he had been up to, proving that he was basically just trying to date whoever would take him. I guess he had multiple girlfriends too. After that, everyone turned on him, even his roommates. He went back home in total embarrassment. I went to college with a guy like this. He would shoot a shot with any woman. It was absolutely wild. I think he eventually transferred schools because he got aggro with several people on the women's swim team, and they had cause to report him. My neighbors growing up consisted of a man, his wife, and their daughter. The man, let's call him Terry, worked away in another state across the country and seemed to always be gone. If he wasn't gone 9 months out of the year total, then he wasn't gone a single day. His wife just worked at a local spa and held down the house while he was away at work always. Terry was a tall, rather lean, redneck fella who was missing a front tooth. He wasn't one of the seemingly brain-dead, almost on the creepy side redneck, but he was more on the righteous, I'll do anything for my family and neighbors side, if that makes sense. Anyway, my point is that he was a great guy, always cutting our grass and his, lending a hand whenever he could, and even helped us restrain my formerly crackhead uncle one New Year's when he'd gotten out of control until the cops came. Couldn't ask for a better neighbor. Fast forward 10 or so years, I'm no longer in my parents' house. I go to visit one day and notice that neighbor's house has all new vehicles. My mom informed me that old Terry and his family don't live there anymore. Apparently, spending 9 months out of the year every year in another state, Terry managed to start not one, but 2 new families, in which he had kids in both. It took 10 years of him working away for his wife to find out. She said he was gone so much, it pains her to say it, but she wasn't even all that mad. Her emotional connection to him dwindled with him being gone so much to begin with. As for his families in another state, he was living with one full-time during his 9 months away. And for his trips back home, he would tell his new family that he had work and trips to go on. The third family was apparently a weird situation. It was a woman who had 2 baby fathers that were in and out the house already, so she was used to that dynamic, and he just became the third. Showed up and left whenever he wanted to with that family. Terry is still a solid dude in my book. He handmade these huge wooden motorcycle-shaped yard ornaments in memoriam of my mom's brother who passed away and gave it to her on her birthday. 3 families or not, I have no beef with him. Dated a guy for 3 years. Nothing super crazy, but thought it might go somewhere. We shared some similar passions, including music. He was in a punk band. We visited the same coffee shop together and watched bands play. One day he's a ghost in the wind. Everyone in my circle was just as baffled. Turns out he was an ultra-conservative Christian. A friend of a friend found out he was getting married. His wedding page talked about how ultra-faithful he was and how Jesus helped him stay true. I work it. A coworker was in an auto accident and is fine now, and he went to the hospital and his badly damaged laptop was brought to me to see if I could recover any data off it. He's a real quiet guy, a little nerdy, keeps to himself mostly. Does his job and goes home. Among other things, I found the manuscripts for about a dozen smutty novels that he had self-published on Amazon featuring female domination. Guy asks his wife if she'd like to tie him up. She reluctantly agrees. It turns out she's really into it. A couple chapters later, he's naked on all 4s eating out of a dog bowl while she has dinner. He shouldn't be using the company laptop for that, but I didn't report him. I recovered what legitimate company data I could, and when I found out all of it was backed up already, I nuked the drive and said there was nothing I could get off the machine. When I told him the drive and laptop were both a total loss, his words were, "Oh, that's too bad." But on his face was a look of immense relief. Well, this guy was living with his childhood sweetheart, and one night she called in a panic because he hadn't come home. We were calling all the hospitals as his phone was turned off. Never really did out where he had been, but he turned up the next day. Things got weird for a few weeks, and we heard whispers of another woman, but no concrete evidence. We sent out our wedding invitations, and he told us she couldn't come, but gave no reasons. A week before our wedding, 2 things happened. We had a family dinner, and he brought the other woman, who cheerfully talked about finally finding a dress to wear to the wedding. Gulp. And I went to my hair trial, and the hairdresser during small talk mentioned something about the baby. Cue me saying, "What baby?" Turns out his childhood sweetheart was 5 months pregnant, and none of our family knew, which was why she wasn't coming to the wedding. She also wasn't coming because his other woman, the one he'd been seeing for over 12 months, was coming. And this is the kicker. The other woman thought he lived at his dad's house, thought his birthday was on another day, had spent Xmas with him, birthdays, etc., etc. He literally had 2 lives with 2 different addresses and birthdays. Needless to say, neither relationship worked out for him. An old college friend of my wife's was CIA, a lot of people at her wedding were State Department, but with odd backstories. She was in the Navy. After that, I called her on it, and she just smiled. Had a friend in the UK who clearly qualified for the SAS. He was in the TA, disappeared for SAS qualification twice, was pulled put first time due to injury, was running up hills in London with a backpack full of rocks. After second time, he had to suddenly gotta go away for a while, went away for a few years and said he was just busy. Legend. Bro really ran a whole cinematic universe. 3 wives, 3 lives, and not a single sequel knew about the others. Honestly, I don't know if I'm impressed, disturbed, or both. My ex was camersexual or something. Not very into RL sex, but had 8 online GFS when I found out. He'd go on these online dating sites and was so smooth chatting them up. Each one had a folder on his computer with links to the things they told him about their lives. He'd do these elaborate photo shoots for them. One even included a cucumber. I didn't see the photos, just saw the chat logs. He stayed over at mine one weekend, and it was really lovely. But on Sunday, just suddenly announced he had to go home, and it turns out he had an online date with one of the girls. This guy really put forward the image of being ethical and honest. The bits that really pissed me off was that one of those girls who he'd been seeing online for 6 years, so since before me, had been 16 when they'd first hooked up. She'd come over to Ireland even, and he'd fobbed her off so they never met up. The reason he fobbed her off was that he was with his ex at the time. The ex he never got over but had been in bed with messaging these girls. He garnered so much sympathy saying that he thought the GF had cheated on him. He acted like a mopey victim, and all that time he'd been cheating online with a barely legal infatuated teenager. So gross. When I confronted him about this, he tried to say that he'd been seeing her first, so technically he was cheating on her by seeing me. This will probably get buried, but I have a few. 1, the first was when I was in my 20s and my grandfather died, and my grandmother decided that was a good time to confess to me that she'd cheated on him their whole marriage. When I was really little, before I started school, she'd often take me to a male family friend's house where I'd sit in the living room and watch TV while they talked. That opened a floodgate of memories, like when my grandfather was out of town and strange men came to the house and she'd leave with them, or when she didn't pick me up from school and I had to walk home. I stopped talking to her after that because my grandfather worked his ass off to provide her a good life, and that's what she does. Over the decades, I've heard stories from other relatives about her cheating escapades. 2, my first job was at a doctor's office. One girl started calling out a lot, and eventually we were told that she had cervical cancer. The doctors had visited her in the hospital after she had to have a total hysterectomy and chemo, and said she didn't look very well. Eventually, she quit, and said she was moving to her parents about an hour away. Well, about 6 months later, the doctors were in that town, and who did they run into? Yeah, her, and she was very heavily pregnant. And that's not all. The guy she was with was one of our patients, who it turned out she'd gotten married to while he was still a patient of ours. That was against policy and subject to termination, so I guess she made up this whole story instead of just quitting. Then we also found out through the grapevine that the time the doctors visited her in the hospital, she wasn't there for a hysterectomy. She was there because her husband had beaten the hell out of her. 3, many years ago I had been dating this guy for 1.5 years when he moved in with me. I got up early every morning to make him breakfast and pack a lunch. A few weeks later, he quit his job, and I helped him find a new one, which was traveling construction, so he was away often. One very early Saturday morning, a little more than 2 months into this new job, an unprogrammed number kept calling me, and I finally answered. It was him. He was calling me to come pick him up from jail. I picked him up and dropped him off at his parents'. Over the next week, I learned a lot. First, the story he gave me for why he was arrested wasn't true. He was arrested for theft. 2, he was stealing because he was addicted to crack and had been for many years. I had never once seen him high in all that time together. 3. He hadn't quit his job. He had been fired just a few days before moving in with me and was only pretending to go to work. He was out doing drugs with friends. And 4, cheating on me with an older woman who had money. With his new job, it turned out that he was coming home every weekend and staying with her. I guess this is 5. I promptly packed up all of his things and dropped them on his parents' porch. And 6. This was nearly 20 years ago, but I only recently found out that not only was he getting arrested literally every Friday from the week he moved in with me until that last time when he called me, but he has a rap sheet 16 pages long, going back to 1999. Now I understand why his mother wanted us to get married so badly, because the only time he was not getting arrested was while we were together, until the last couple of months, of course. But the most mind-blowing thing about all of this is that everyone, his parents, his brother, his friends, were well aware of his drug addiction and trouble with the law, and not one person said a thing about it to me until the very end. And it was his brother's girlfriend who filled me in. Happened to a friend of mine. Her father was murdered when we were about 15. She was the youngest of about 8 siblings. When we were about 19-20, her mom let them know she was dying and had only a couple of months to live. Turns out her mom had hepatitis from a blood transfusion way back when she was young and had known for years she was dying. She died a few weeks after she told all the kids. Then a couple years after that, my friend and her siblings received a message on Facebook from a man. Turns out he was their full sibling. Their mom and dad had fallen pregnant at a young age, and the baby was put up for adoption. None of them ever knew, or any other members of their extended family brother-in-law. He had to move his GFS car one morning and noticed she had been blasting loud dance music in her car. This set off alarm bells because she'd said she'd been visiting her sick aunt, and he's like, "Why would you be blasting dance music on your way back from seeing an ill relative?" It just didn't add up, so he started keeping a closer eye on her. One day she said she was at a friend's house, and he's like, "Well, I'm parked outside her house and you ain't here, so where are you really?" She had not one, not two, but multiple side pieces of both genders, and will probably never know the exact number or how long it was going on. She was basically handing it out to anyone, and that's how he found out. Easy. My dad took my mom out to the family country house on Mother's Day and told her he was going to be a dad again. Then she took me to a restaurant to tell me how he was with another woman for 8 years, and they were having a baby together. Basically, my dad, who was a salesman, would leave our house on Sunday night because I have a meeting 1,000 kilometers away tomorrow morning, so we'll drive all night, when in fact he was going a few miles away to his mistress's home for the night. Would come back on Saturday morning, of course, pretending he drove all night to come home. So that was a fun time. My ex-boyfriend, 40 in Illinois, had a secret girlfriend for 2 years. I was with him for 5. He ended up breaking up with me over text, and then, about a month later, I found out about her. She had no idea about me, and we learned that he was out with me right after he had pressured her into an abortion. Oh, she was also half his age, of course. She basically lived at his place. He would have to move my stuff out of the bedside table and put hers back when I left after weekends together. Even though I was with him much longer, somehow I became the other woman, because I lived an hour away and had my own life, whereas she was fresh out of school still living with her mother and staying with him all the time. Pretty sure they're still together. That poor girl. My long-term partner, with whom I shared a business and was 2 years into the process of adopting kids, his idea, turned out to have been having a side relationship with our producer almost the entirety of our relationship. It all unraveled when I found a hotel bill. Our producer usually whisked them away immediately. I also found a stack of letters from his ex-girlfriends, and every letter could have been written by me. He obviously got off on the deception, but I was never supposed to know. When I told people, the mask fell, and he started a massive, terrifying, and painful campaign to ruin me, trying to destroy my professional reputation, my finances, everything. They married a few months after it all fell apart. I have no idea whether they are still together, but I kind of hope they are, so that they don't ruin anyone else's lives. Towards the end of our relationship, I found out my ex of 6 years had an account on Sniffies, the gay anonymous hookup app. While I was away, he'd post our home address and host gangbangs, sometimes 20, 30 strangers in a single night, while the house was left unlocked and unattended. And when I confronted him with screenshots from his own account, email, credit card, everything, he flat out denied it for months on end. To this day, he refuses to admit it, even though the proof is absolutely undeniable. I worked with a woman who found out after 36 years of marriage that her husband had a whole other family down in Colombia. I had an employee who had a completely fabricated family. He was ex-military, true, gay, true, dating a doctor who did humanitarian work in South America, false, with a son, false, and daughter, false, with 2 grandkids, false. This ruse lasted 15 years. We never knew the truth until he had a heart attack at work and was technically dead, but one of my supervisors revived him through CPR. At the hospital, his brother showed up, and we asked about his boyfriend and kids' grandkids. This is when we found out it was all made up. Fun, crazy. Actually, it also happened when we went to a Coldplay concert. Ruining marriages seems to be their side hobby. Since the concert was in town, my brother and I stayed at my aunt and uncle's place, and that's when we found out he had another family. Because my aunt works in another city most of the year, he had another woman living in the house. He tried to introduce her as a cousin, since the whole family was in town for a celebration and his mother's place was full. I played dumb and asked this cousin to show me how to use the coffee machine. She jumped right in, knew exactly where everything was, and even told me where to find stuff in the kitchen. That's when I knew she lived there. And as if that wasn't enough, there was also a child running around shouting, "Dad, Dad, Dad." Naturally, I assumed he was talking to my uncle, which really confirmed everything. So my brother and I went full FBI mode for the weekend and uncovered the truth. I told my parents, and we decided to tell my aunt. But guess what? He actually managed to convince her that the woman was really a cousin. And she defended him. That's when I learned 2 universal truths. 1. If a woman is way too comfortable in another woman's kitchen, she spends a lot of time there. 2. Never tell the wife. She probably already knows, and if she doesn't, she'll still defend him. Always the men. In the end, they did get divorced. But trust me, it was a battle. I was in online contact with a teacher from the next country. Same language. Pleasant conversation. Obviously want to search what I talk about. One day he told me that one of his students was flirting with him. I warned him that it was very dangerous, because he will be legally responsible of whatever happened, and she can denounce him for sexual harassment if she get angry somehow. His reaction was strange. Usually, he had respect for my opinion, and this one was obvious. But he was defensive. I explained that I did accuse him of anything, but that if he has not a witness when the girl is near him, she can tell whatever she wants about their relationship, and he will have a hard time to prove to nothing happened. He became very aggressive, launched vile attack against me. Hopefully he didn't really know who and how I was, so his vicious manipulations felt too short. I learned later that he effectively lived with the minor girl while being married. The day she hits 18, they fly across the Atlantic to marry in Vegas, making him bigam, and the mother of the girl alert the justice and the press. But nothing happened, because she was now of legal age. It felt like a fall in the twilight zone. Oh, now's my time to shine. My dad had a stroke on a golf trip in South Carolina. We're from Philly. While my mom is by his side about a week or 2, she starts to get antsy and wants to begin taking care of things that he normally would. So she took his phone to make sure bills are getting paid, etc. There, she uncovered a 10-year affair. So me and my 3 sisters and my mom had our lives blown up. And then, even now, we somehow have to care about our dad who now needs help. My dad had 2 families that lived within 14 miles of each other. We found out when his wife died, and he was listed as a husband and father of her 2 grown sons in her obit. He was married and had a grown son with his 3rd wife when this happened. In 2018, I found out I was leading a double life. My wife had been character assassinating me to all of our friends and my in-laws for a dozen years, telling them I was abusive, a neglectful parent, and a pervert. None led on, but came to my house and smiled as I cooked food for them, poured their wine, made breakfast when they stayed over or we traveled together. She was telling our kids I was dangerous, not to trust me, and that she would keep them safe from preschool age. She gaslit me that the persistent cold behavior from my children was normal and they loved me. I was deliberately isolated from my blood relatives and older friends. Meanwhile, she was cheating, at least 5 different LTRs I later found out about, and hiding a spending problem and blowing through over $500K. When I finally got a clue and filed for divorce, I was immediately ghosted by nearly everyone I knew. Some closer friends unloaded on me a long list of nonsensical accusations against me. My neighbors gave me the stink eye in the grocery store. My kids told me off and took Mom's side, as everyone they knew rallied to her side and reinforced her narrative. And it took me a while to realize I had been living a double life. The life I thought I had. Loving wife, loving kids, loving in-laws, large social circle, was all a fiction. In reality, I was a universally scorned pariah. FYI, I'm doing much better now. Yeah, my fucking ex that I was with for 12 years. She was adopted as a child, and for some reason had a second birth certificate with a second name, second social security number, and an entire slew of social media accounts for the other person. Oh, and of course, she was hiding having a OnlyFans from me for the last 5 years before I caught her cheating ass because she was spoofing her location with a second phone. Yes, we shared locations on our phones. And I went no contact. Been a year and a half, and I'm still trying to put the pieces of myself back together after being in her warpath. Nejber was a sweet retired teacher always bringing over homemade cookies. Turns out she was catfishing guys online as a 20-year-old model, scamming them for travel money. She left her laptop open during a time I went to help her bake, and it was all theat, pics, texts, etc. Never confronted her, but was shook hard from her double life, so my chill, bookwormy roommate who always said she was too tired to go out turned out to be working as a DJ in some underground techno club 3 nights a week. I only found out when I accidentally saw her Instagram tagged in a random reel titled Queen of Bass Drops. Meanwhile, I thought she was in bed with chamomile tea and Harry Potter. Nope, she was out there summoning demons with a fog machine. I swear to God, this story is not a word of a lie. I worked in a bar in Scotland, and we had a good band of regulars, really nice, down-to-earth guys who used to come in, drink, watch sports, then go home. There was genuinely nothing outward or weird about them at all. They never caused any trouble, and I loved chatting to them. One evening, I was working, and the bar was busy. All of a sudden, I heard a really loud commotion behind me, and I turned round to see a young fella absolutely wailing on one of the older regulars. Like, this guy was really going to town on this guy who was old enough to be his grandpa. I ran over, no idea why, because at the time I was a 20-year-old woman, and these were 2 actual grown men fighting. But I split it up, shoved the young guy out of the bar, and attended to the older guy, we'll call him Jim, who had some pretty significant injuries. The police appeared, and one of the officers asked me to give a statement. Jim then quickly whispered in my ear, "Please don't tell them anything. Say you didn't see anything. Please, I'll explain later." I had no idea what was going on, but Jim was a lovely guy. If he asked me not to say anything, I wasn't going to say anything. The police left after gathering that no one was going to tell them anything, and I demanded to speak to Jim to find out why he had asked me not to say anything to the cops. I saw everything, and I had a very good description of the kid they were looking for. Why didn't he want them to go and arrest him? "That was my son," Jim said. "He's just upset with me about something. But it's a family matter. We will sort it ourselves." Turned out, Jim Jr. had met a girl in a local nightclub, hit it off, and started casually seeing her. They had met up quite a few times and been intimate on a handful of occasions. Jim Jr. then went to her house for the first time and was shocked to see photos of his dad on her walls. Jim had been seeing her mom for the best part of 20 years. Jim Jr. was 24. His girlfriend was his half-sister. As my mother was dying, I found out that Dad had only pretended to have a job for about 30 years, but was spending his full-time working hours with his girlfriend instead, only coming home Sunday afternoons. Nothing happened. Mom was a total bitch, and I figured Dad deserved some happiness considering he stayed with her, so I didn't tell her. After Mom died, Dad broke up with the girlfriend anyway, as far as I can tell. He didn't need the escape from Mother, and the girlfriend didn't want an old man hanging around her. She still gets a little summon in Dad's will, and I figure she deserves it for the years she put in putting up with that old fart. Dad didn't need to work as he played the stock market like a pro. When my grandfather passed, his mistress of 30 years showed up to his funeral. It was a shock to everyone, though I suspect my grandmother was in denial, and she later found out he removed $60,000 from his pension a week before he died. He had bought her a house years ago and paid for her son to go to medical school. There were a lot of red flags in hindsight. My other grandfather found out his father had a third, secret family 3 hours away. Only he and one of his known 2 siblings and 2 half-siblings were willing to meet this secret family once it was revealed. I'm fairly certain that when the mother of family 3 passed, the half-siblings contacted my grandfather, or one of his 4 siblings, so secret families on both sides of my family. When I had a part-time job at a shipping warehouse, there was a high turnaround rate of employees, except for my coworker who was a lot older than everyone else and had been there for years. He trained me at the job, we got along very well, and chatted during work. He casually mentioned several auditions he went to, and it turns out he was a professional actor. He had his own agent and everything. He mostly did commercials and indie movies, but had a few small roles in some blockbusters. One day in the break room, he pointed out a commercial playing on the TV that he was in. He only took the part-time job because he was usually on set in the mornings and wanted some more income since he was free in the evenings. A funny story he had. When he did a commercial for a hot wings restaurant, they opted to have him and the other actors actually eat the food for every take. And since they wanted it to look appetizing, the wings were steaming hot. So he had to eat dozens and dozens of spicy wings while burning his mouth, literally and figuratively, the whole shoot. He was so full by the time they were done, but then the restaurant owner said, "Oh gee, I forgot. We're supposed to give you guys a free meal as a thank you." That day at work, he said he didn't even want to think about chicken for a whole month. People kept sharing information with me about my ex-husband. I eventually couldn't hide from it, even though I was terrified of retaliation. Mom was checking charges on the account, noticed charges from Ford. We didn't own a Ford and had never purchased anything from them. She dug deeper and went into the phone records. My dad had been having an affair for years with multiple women and had moved all 3 of us to the other side of the country so that he could be closer to his current mistress. Mom never divorced him. He just left after that. But we never saw it coming. He was a really good dad. Was friends with 2 dudes, friend A I met at school, and friend B through friend A someday. Friend A talked a lot more with B, who seemed to be a quiet guy, didn't go out as much as anyone else, and talked a lot about the occult, conspiracies, vampires, werewolves, etc. That was his jam. One day, friend A said he was worried B was into some dangerous stuff or going crazy in delusions. From what I remember, friend B was talking to some people he met on the internet and went with them in missions. He should not tell anyone, but some of these would need him to go to another city or state by airplane and get back a few days later. To his family, he would say it was some quick job as the crew of some band. I never asked him about this, but also never asked friend A for more info, since he probably was the one full of shit. A secret paternity test after a genetic screening revealed something that was suspected in a family group chat for years. That one of our Nibbings isn't my half-brothers, it's his best friend's. Which is rich because she tried so hard to get me to understand her experience of being asked if her husband was the father of both kids. I chopped it up to ignorance and was like, "Sis, no one has ever questioned my children's paternity, but you live in a different area with different dynamics." I was out of state for work, and I got a call from a woman one day claiming my then-girlfriend had suddenly co-signed a car and an apartment with their husband, and she and her husband were getting a divorce. He was her co-worker for 2 years. For my wife, grandfather, unmarried to her biological maternal grandmother, was on deathbed and instructed his girlfriend, my wife's grandmother, to search his entire house for his stash of gold coins and stuff, and to divvy it up mostly to his 2 completely unrelated daughters that no one ever heard of before, and just leave a tiny bit for the family he was playing grandfather for like 25 years. He was always secretive and lived separately, but apparently was a loving present grandparent. No one knew of anyone, and they had to awkwardly meet at the funeral. I found out that a friend of mine is a serial cheater. It made me sad, but I was a marriage counselor for years, so that kind of desensitized me on this stuff. I kind of expect the worst in people. Sad for his wife, and for him if she finds out. My best friend from childhood had his marriage fall apart due to his extracurricular activities. He worked on the oil rigs for years before, and after they got married, he'd be gone for 2 to 3 weeks at a time before coming back for a week. I found out his marriage blew up on Facebook, which shocked me because he always seemed like a good partner and father. I'd finally got in touch with him after a stint in rehab and found out that while he would be gone, he'd be cheating constantly, developed a huge pill problem, and became an alcoholic. His ex never knew about the cheating, but the pills ended up being what made her walk away with the kids and get a no-contact order. The whole time they were together, he was cheating, before and after the wedding. The pills started while he was at work and became a massive issue that he ended up in rehab a few times before he finally got his shit somewhat together. I never knew he was like that, and I was absolutely surprised. He had it all and literally threw it all away. At the end of the day, it's his life to do what he wants with it. But I was so shocked, as I never would have guessed he had this whole other side to him. My quiet coworker turned out to be a semi-pro poker player traveling for tournaments on weekends. None of us had a clue. My quiet housemate was running a pirated CD business from their bedroom inventory, filling the room, shipments going out at 3 a.m. every night. Surreal we didn't know till much later. Grandpa's other family visited him in retirement home same time as we did. Turned out they knew about us for 30-plus years, but we not about them. At least we could stop thinking he's the worst hunter ever because he never came back with game. Friends for years, both married. One day they say they've got a divorce. I'm like, oh, okay. Then 2 weeks later they said that they met someone. Then 2 weeks after that they tell me even though we live in separate states and are involved with different people, and we are not romantic, they can never talk to me again. Fast forward 6 months, and a mutual friend online tells me that they had been with another person for 2 years prior to leaving their marriage. Once the divorce was finalized with that person, they committed to the other they had been cheating with. That person made them cut off everyone but their 3 main childhood friends. Super creepy, super uncharacteristic of this person. But talking to mutual friend, it sounds like they tried to sacrifice their entire old life for a new one. Long story short, it didn't work. Now they want to have their old friends back and are homeless, possibly pregnant, I believe. Crazy. I'm always fascinated how some other person could have such a hold on someone. They want to talk to me, but I'm getting like Norman Bates vibes from them. Don't give second chances to people who made it clear you were never their friend. Typical family of 4, 2 boys. Dad is a trucker, drives around Europe, often be gone for 2 weeks straight. Second family in a completely different country. The usual younger wife had another kid. Family 1 found out when the boys were 18-20. Wife found the second mobile phone. Proper screwed with the 2 boys' heads. Afike, the other family still does know. Their dad was always a creepy asshole. I used to work with someone who convinced his wife that he was a member of the FBI or the CIA. I can't remember which. He used this as a cover for his absences and for not being able to explain those absences. As it turned out, he had a different wife and a whole new family across our small state. Both wives and families believed him, were proud of him, and worried about him terribly when he was away on a mission. He was just with his other family. One wife even used to have masses said in his honor where the entire congregation prayed for his safety. Years ago, I worked at Denny's, and we had this guy that would come by quite often and flash our female waitstaff through the windows. He only flashed the blonde ones. This went on for months, and though the regulars and I tried to catch him, we never did, and he was always long gone before the cops showed up. Well, one day I found out that a friend of mine had been busted for various things like indecent exposure, indecent liberties, etc. And as part of his plea deal, he had to admit to stuff he'd done. And flashing at Denny's was one of the things he admitted to. After his arrest, the flashing stopped. Still wonder how things would have gone if we'd actually caught his dumb ass. As for my friend, before he was caught, He was in the Navy, married, and had a kid. He lost pretty much everything after he was caught. Heard he'd even been discharged from the Navy. I dated this guy from work for a year. Went to his house, he'd come over to mine. We spent a significant amount of time together. Similar schedules at work. He hadn't been answering his phone the day after his birthday. Then another number called, and it was his girlfriend, of 6 years that he lived with, and possibly had gotten pregnant. He had taken us to the same restaurants, same movies, same staycation spots. When he wasn't with me, he went back home to her, and vice versa. He would change his backgrounds on his phone when he was with us, change our contact names. Apparently enough people at work knew about this. Even more embarrassing, her and I met up and kind of pieced it all together. Her behavior was really odd to me too, though. She was fully ready to stay with this guy, even after admitting this was not the first time he had done this. After finding out the stress physically affected me, I was throwing up every night for a week until I went in to be seen. Was not pregnant, just very, very stressed. She had remained in contact with me over this span of time. Once she discovered I wasn't pregnant, all communication was cut off. So yeah, that sent me into a phobia of relationships for a while. My mom's ex-boyfriend was using his brother's identity, living his brother's life as his own, used his name, social, birth certificate, everything. He was a felon, so he used his brother's identity to work and get housing accounts. Crazy thing is his brother knew about it and enabled him through it. Husband and I got DNA genealogy tests so my son would know where we came from. The day after I gave birth, I matched with a whole string of people I didn't know existed. Grandpa had another family, 4 children, before he ran off to be with my grandmother and had a son, my father. Gained a son and a whole lot of cousins that year. I had a friend who I met on GTA Online. She was good friends with my girlfriend, and I for 5 years, and about 2 years ago she gave birth to 2 twin boys. She'd come over to our house, leave the boys with her ex-husband's mom, and hang out with us around our kids. She even showed us photos of her kids too. One day she didn't pick up the phone when we were planning on having everyone come over for a sort of kickback thing that we did. My girl and I assumed the worst, and after we got in touch with all of our mutuals, we all concluded that her ex-husband, she told us that he threatened to kill her and the kids, had gotten out of the mental facility he was in and got to her. She also told us the reason that her and her ex-husband broke up was because he cheated on her while she was in the delivery room giving birth to their twin boys. We called the police and got them involved. We then started using the Yellow Pages website to get in touch with the husband's mother. We found some odd things, that the last name was off a little bit on the husband when we found them on Facebook, and the address she gave me in case she ever got hurt, I asked her for it, didn't include an apartment number. I got her sister's apartment number because she told me she lived in the same complex as her sister now, and finally found the ex-husband's mother's number. We got in contact with the ex-MIL, only to find out that my friend of 5 years lied about having kids in the first place for a whole year. She told me her ex-husband was going to get me a job working in the government after I got my degree in criminal justice. She even texted me off of a fake number acting like she was him, and he actually worked at an auto parts store this whole time or something similar. The 2 boys she claimed were hers and showed us photos of. I got her to admit that they're not photos she took from online. I reverse image searched them, but instead, they're the kids of someone she personally knows and acted like were hers. She then lied again and said that the reason she lied about having 2 kids in the first place was because she actually had a miscarriage when she first told us she was pregnant. I confirmed with the MIL that she had lied about this too. Turns out, she put her ex-husband through absolute hell, constantly lying to him about being pregnant and having miscarriages. Eventually, he left her over it, and that's the real reason they broke up. My ex and I had had a lot of conversations about our sex life and mismatched libidos. She was just not interested in sex, and I'd been wanting to break into less vanilla areas and try new things. We loved each other, so we were trying to find a way to compromise and work around this. She told me she thought she might be asexual, blah, blah. Found out not only did she have a body count of 100, she was hooking up with 2 strangers per month and even active as a performer player in the kink community, going to sex parties and all sorts of theme nights. So, she was not asexual. Did a number on my self-esteem, LOL. I didn't explicitly find out at the time. but I had a light bulb moment and considered that my dad might a drug dealer when I was about 9. One day, on the way to Chuck E. Cheese, he stopped by a rundown house on a bad street, just in and out while the rest of the family waited in the car. IDK what it was about the cigarette smell, because I grew up around it, but I had never smelled it so strong. As an adult, I realized the odor was so strong because I was also smelling crack. I could only recognize cigarette. In retrospect, he worked as a cook at a chain family-style restaurant, i.e., low wage, but always had money for nice clothes, shoes, outings, etc., for himself and the family. Lived in a nice, modest home. Went to church on Sundays at my grandma's request, but we were always late because he stayed out late Saturday night. I now know why. He was always well put together, never brought any drama or dangerous people around as far as I could tell, and generally presented as the average working-class dad. My suspicions were later confirmed when he told me straight up when I was 17. He was selling, and towards the end, using crack as well. He was never big time or anything, but definitely had a nice side hustle that allowed us to live comfortably. My neighbor was distributing Fent, got picked up by the feds. The shit it's brought into my life, just dealt with it today. Out in a field telling people whatever deal they had with him is over. Consider putting my pistol into my pants and deciding my ability to talk to everyone as a human on their level would suffice. When the previous encounter with a different individual he had to deal with me made me wish I did have my gun. Shit. And I just rent here. But I'm not going to let this stuff keep going on. We deserve to live peacefully here. Glad I'm a big, strong, dominant person. It's still scary, but I'll make it through. 2W. My mom dislikes mint chocolate. Every year for her birthday, my dad gives her a package of mint chocolate and then returns it to the store. And on one of these rare occasions, he kisses her in front of me. He leans in with an ugly, humorous grimace on his face. My parents aren't openly confrontational, so I'm confused. I ask my mom why my dad is mean to her. She replies, "He loves me, even if he calls me fat, and he loves you too." And the wheels in my brain start turning. When did my dad ever call her fat? And then I remember everything. Over the course of the next week, my memories come pouring back. I remember my dad's affair. I wasn't supposed to be there when his lady friend came over to our house in a scanty robe and blew up an air mattress in the front room, but I wasn't picked up by my uncle at school and rode the bus home. Dad's affair didn't work out, and the lady left in a huff. I remember lots more. My family are members of a church where smoking, drinking alcohol, or doing drugs, or even drinking tea and coffee is discouraged. And my dad is not only a member, but a high-standing member. If people knew what I knew, they would certainly look at him differently. My dad dealt illegal drugs, stole and laundered cases full of money, took us to parties where we were drugged, and other bad things happened to us, was part of a criminal ring, as were our friends, and was self-admittedly a pedophile. One night I was drifting in and out of a coma only to hear my dad tell my mom to go to a certain website, and he spelled it out very clearly for her to get it right. rapey.co, he said. That's the address to a website that has now been taken down where people sent pictures of their nude children back and forth and what they wanted to do to them. Some pretty vulgar stuff. Look up Ryan Montgomery to learn more about it. My dad's camera was a prominent feature of his nighttime shenanigans. He drugged me, I think daily at least for part of my childhood, and molested me in the middle of the night when I was asleep. When he saw my eyes open one night, I had woken up and could hear and see but not move. He took a dropper bottle and squirted what was in it onto a towel and put it on my face. My skin burned where he rubbed it, and soon I fell asleep again. My younger siblings still live with my parents. I called DCFS and the police, and they came and questioned my parents and siblings. But my siblings don't remember anything, and both of my parents won't say anything. I don't blame my siblings, because at one point I didn't remember either. But that also means nothing is being done. I don't know when things will pick up. I can only hope that something will happen soon. My own dad lived a double life right underneath my nose, and as a child, I didn't have the know-how to understand what was going on. Son's good friend family. Pretty typical story for bigamy, I guess. Both high earners and travel internationally frequently. Kids in known family are late teens, early 20s. Wife finds out husband has been cheating on her. Don't know how. Wife finds out he is remarried and brought his wife to the U.S. Dad has full second family, 2 or 3 youngish kids, 6 to 10. His kids not step. We call them family 1 and 2 as it's confusing. Mom divorces dad and moves out of state to be closer to her family. Dad moves into family 2 house, also another state. Mental anguish all around. If you assumed their religion, you would be correct. This all exploded like 4 years ago, so not like back in the day. My friend's dad took a welding job in South America around the time he entered high school. His family was pretty poor, so the pay increase that came with it was life-changing. I think his dad worked in South America for at least 10 or 15 years, coming home a few times a year until he basically got too old and retired. Well, one day a letter arrived in the mail. Turns out Dad basically had a common-law wife over there and a daughter. I honestly don't think anyone in his family was that surprised, because how do you realistically stay gone that long without seeking out companionship? Friend of mine found out in college his dad had another family his whole life, and he had all of these step-siblings. The dad had a lot of business travel. I just don't know how you pull that off for 20 years. Wow, those stories always blow my mind. I once found out a coworker I trusted had a completely secret second family. Felt like I was in a movie. I used to live in semi-independent housing with others in a similar situation I was in. I met one guy who we'll call Ben, who boasted about being a head chef at a well-known restaurant earning $5,000 a month, and that was a lot for a 19-year-old. He had a super close relationship with a support worker in the house we lived in, so it was almost like they were mother and son. He would confide in everything with her. He always talked about his girlfriend whenever he could, and he would be with her in his free time. But whenever he's at home, his so-called best male friend is over. So yeah, anyway, one day I did some Facebook stalking and found multiple accounts with the same guy under a different name, Will. Will was openly gay. Why did he have to hide it? One day Ben hasn't come home for a few days and we start to get worried. The support worker lets me in on some information that he owes $3,000 in rent. I'm shook. Where's his money going, and why hasn't he paid rent in 6 months? I tell her what I found online, and she said that it clicked for her a while ago, and she isn't surprised. Eventually, he comes home, and he's confronted by the support worker on why he isn't paying rent. He says he's had a really bad fight with his girlfriend and doesn't want to talk, but she insists he's going to get evicted, so he storms out, basically threatening to hurt himself. He packed up his stuff a few days later, and I never heard from him again. A man with 3 wife out Sabay. The country lied to the present wife. He is single, and she is just 19 with 3 kids. My BIL, sister's wife's husband. My BIL is very egotistical. He's also kind of a big shot in business, not like a famous person, just the kind of guy who has always been like some big department head in charge of huge teams at big companies. He has a big need to be the center of attention and always seems to be trying to prove to everyone that he's super awesome. Anyway, his department company had some big partnership going on with another company that required him to go to another big city regularly. He was there pretty often, 2-3 times a month for 2-3 days at a time. After a couple years, my SIL realized that the project, or whatever it was, had ended long ago. He just kept going to that city every other week because he had a girlfriend there. Not but I have a friend who found out after 28 years of life that her dad is not her real dad doing a 23andMe. Her mom is not a great person, and I think she tried to gaslight them. LOL, anyways, I think they are still together and going about life like it never happened. My boss was preaching healthy lifestyle, but I saw him destroy 3 burgers at midnight. Damn, all these stories of men having more than one family. I'm barely holding on trying to manage one family. My secret life would be going on a business trip, which is actually just a hotel in town where I can have no one needing me for a whole weekend. Had a friend killed in a car crash in high school. His father had a complete second family with 2 other sons a couple of hours away. We only found out when the father died. My best friend in high school found out his dad had a secret family in the same big town we lived in. They lived in a small 3-bedroom, the smallest 3-bedroom imaginable, 0 space, with 3 brothers and his parents. Probably $150K in 2005. His dad purchased the second family. The mistress was legitimately ugly, and her personality is that of nagging bitch Karen. It was the most confusing part. A 5-bedroom, $500K house back in 2005. Money. It blew the family up. He'd take the second family to Disneyland, tropical vacations, etc. He never took his real family on any vacations, out to dinner even, etc. The crazy part is my friend got married a few years back, and last year his father-in-law passed away. At the funeral, they find out his father-in-law had a secret second family. Holy shit. What are the chances? I've never heard of it happening outside of a bad movie or detective novel, but his dad and Phil both had secret second families. My old manager turned out to be living a complete double life. At work, he was this quiet, reliable guy with a wife and 2 kids, always home by 6. A few years later, it came out that he had another apartment in the city where he'd been living with a second partner for almost a decade. Neither family knew about the other until he ended up in the hospital and both showed up at once. The fallout was insane. Both families walked away, and he ended up completely alone. My mother lied about going to college and getting a degree, working for the school district when I was a wee one, etc. Thanks to Ancestry.com, I found out she was a typist until she married my father. She would lie like a cheap rug as long as he wasn't around. I once dated a guy that was desperate to date me. We were both living in Virginia at the time for just a couple months. He would talk about the future and all. He never wanted to give me any of his socials besides Snapchat. I found him on FB a couple days later. Turns out he had a wife and a kid. He got very upset when I broke it off with him and said we could do long distance. I'm still thinking of texting the wife. My Nana's first husband was listed as MIA after WW2, assumed dead, until he showed up like 30 years later. He had met a woman in France and started a life with her. The day he showed up out of the blue was the one and only time my aunt ever met her father. He tried to reconcile when he was on his deathbed. Story goes that she spit on the letter and threw it out without another thought. My papa adopted her when he married my Nana. Even the military thought the man was dead. My BFF's dad was a long-haul trucker. Turned out his hauls weren't actually that long. He was just spending time with his other wives. Only her mom was a legal marriage. The rest were just cultural ceremonies. They're, if we never talk about it, it'll never exist type family. So her parents are still together. I didn't know until he passed, but my grandfather had an entire secret family in Hawaii. The 60s were definitely a different time. My best friend in college discovered her father's affair, secret life, because he butt-dialed her while getting a BJ from his mistress. My old co-worker had a sick grandma excuse for missing shifts. Turns out he was running a whole DJ side hustle at clubs every weekend. A client told me that at his father-in-law's funeral, a woman showed up inconsolable and a complete stranger to the family. Turns out the FIL had a whole second family the next town over, which he had maintained for 20 years. I was once talking to this seemingly great guy I had just met. He was new to the area, took me out to a fancy dinner the night of his birthday. He made me feel truly special. Anyway, I was stalking a bit and found his mostly unused TikTok account. There was only one video with one comment from a girl. I found the girl's profile and found they had been together for years. She had just moved states to be with him, and he was taking me to dinner on his birthday. I still follow her on social media. She recently got engaged to a seemingly nice guy. I'm happy for her. Stepfather was a closeted, to us, gay swinger and would throw big parties at our house when left alone by himself. The way he got caught was he used to organize his hookups and respond to ads on Craigslist, and would CC copies of those messages to his own personal email. Well, one day, He accidentally CC'd his current party planning email chain to his own son's, my stepbrother's, email address, because they both have the same first name. Autocorrect fucked him. Well, when his own son got an email from his dad mentioning how much Dad wanted to get his ass graphically pounded, that kind of blew the lid off his decades-plus second life. For some reason, instead of covering it up, he gave up his email passwords, so the whole family got to correlate the dates of all his parties and dates with all the times he didn't go on vacation for one reason or another. His inability to travel to a grandchild's birthday because he couldn't find a kennel for the dog was coincidentally the same time he packed out a 5-bedroom house with pool and jacuzzi. We used to always think it was so nice when he couldn't make a trip that he would have the house really deep cleaned. Other highlights include meeting up for quickies while taking the dog, my dog who I let them have, for long walks in the woods. She won't bother us. And his love for Costco hot dogs and all that entails in the Costco parking lot. I walk past the cars there differently now. I also got to find out that he could afford to buy certain boyfriends a new car, but for some reason could not afford to pay for the college he promised to pay for me. The worst part, though, is when the divorce was going through, and I confronted him about his sexuality. A part of me realized that because of his age and when he came up through the world, a gay man having a beard family was a necessity to climb the corporate ladder. I tried to let him know if he just accepted who he was and what he did, that it was okay to be gay in this day and age. But he basically doubled down on he was sick and how he thought it was the fluoride in the drinking water. Literal Alex Jones conspiracy shit. Last picture I saw of him before he died was him and his friend roommate on a beach wearing matching MAGA hats. My mom's aunt was married to a guy who started a second family. He, never spent time with her for 20 years and finally got a divorce and married the other woman. My mom's cousin, who was adopted, eventually met his half-siblings. He also met his birth siblings, so he went from being an only child to one of several siblings. My aunt believed her ex was going to come to his senses and return to her until the day he died. Then, she started calling herself a widow. A friend of mine's father passed away not too long ago. After his father's death, my friend found out from his aunt that A, his father had done quite a bit of prison time over some narcotics-related charges, and that B, my friend and his sister share the same mother, but have different fathers. And from what I understand, his mother still refuses to talk to him or his sister about any of it. I used to work at a hospital. I had 2 friends I would hang out with, usually separately as we had different shared interests. One friend would tell me about someone who worked in admin and was having an affair with someone in PT. The admin person was married with kids. This was over about a year. She would say she saw them at a party or while out for evening. Then I would hang out with other friend, and she would tell me about her neighbor who thought her husband was having an affair. They had kids, and this woman also worked at hospital, but on night shifts. Eventually, after hearing all these stories, I put it together. They were talking about the same people involved in an affair. I unfortunately told my friend who knew the neighbor. Not maliciously, it was just an aha moment, and she told the wife. Whew, the uproar that ensued was epic. Finger-pointing and accusations everywhere. I felt terrible, and it torpedoed a friendship by innocently working out these ongoing conversations had a link. A divorce followed, and the affair couple married and moved out of town. They eventually divorced after a few kids also. The thing that eventually brought it together was that one friend would call the man by a nickname the family used, and the other used his real name. One day, I asked about the nickname, and his real name came out. I found out when their other girlfriend popped up on my Facebook recommendations. My horrible grandfather. He worked for a power company and told his wife that he was going to Vegas for work. Turns out, he met, married, and had a child with a woman down there, and no one knew. So, bigamist. He came back and no one knew what had happened until my aunt, who was doing genealogy, found the child's birth certificate and my grandfather was on it. My grandfather was dead, thank God, by that time, and the family thinks the child may have died, as there's no other record. Awful all around. I just did my family tree and, as best I can make out, an ancestor of mine had a wife and 2 kids in one house and another wife, According to the document, possibly he was just her baby daddy, and child living with her family across town. One family had his surname, and one was using his middle name as their last name. Weirdly, it was the legitimate family that dropped his name and the illegitimate one that kept it. I wonder if he got found out and they were so outraged that they decided to destroy that link with him. I figured out someone was faking their death because he started editing a Wikipedia article about himself, and that resulted in extensive harassment IRL and online. And I went to the FBI. I had an open case with them as a victim for something else and mentioned it to the FBI agent on my case, and his exact words were, "Holy shit, excuse my language, please talk to my coworker. He has been working the case against XYZ for years." He's been extradited back to the U.S. and is currently on trial for several rape charges, fleeing, and financial crimes. He also got married to someone in the UK in the time after he faked his death, and they both adamantly maintained he wasn't this person until very recently. Edit. To clarify, he was extradited from the UK back to the U.S. where he was born and raised. He is only being tried in the U.S., but there are potentially pending charges in the UK. This good-looking fit fellow dated my sister for a while. About 8 years later, I work at a 4-person mixed-sex office, and there he is. Like an old friend, he was nice to see. He still dressed well and was always so polished. Sometimes he did tell crude sexual jokes or things saw about women on the way to work. Example, some large-breasted woman running, and he goes on to give a visual demonstration of bouncing boobs. Pretty embarrassing to see him say crude crap like that. After a year of working with him, he announced one day, he is leaving his wife and 2 kids to go live with his boyfriend. Oh, I never would have expected that from him, and I worked with a few other gay guys in the same company in previous years. Found out about my bestie being an OnlyFans, I didn't judge. I joined Met a Woman at a language learning event and got involved for about 6 months. At first, the relationship seemed totally legitimate. We'd meet at her place or mine a few times a week. Slowly, some things didn't add up. After 6 months, I confronted her. She confessed that she also worked part-time as a prostitute. That was the last time I saw her. I cannot have someone like that in my life. I've seen some pretty wild ones. Here are a few stories people have shared about discovering someone's double life. The perfect dad, who wasn't a woman, grew up thinking her dad was a traveling salesman who was just busy with work. When she got older, she found out he had another family in a nearby city, complete with a wife and 2 kids around the same age as her. Both families thought they were the real one. The co-worker with 2 careers. Someone had a colleague who was a quiet, reserved accountant. One night, a group went out to a club and spotted him as the main DJ, headphones on, crowd cheering, neon lights flashing. He had built a whole second life as a popular local performer, and none of his office coworkers knew. The shy student who was famous online. A college student was really quiet, always kept to herself, and never talked much in class. One day, someone stumbled across her TikTok, where she had millions of followers, brand sponsorships, and was basically internet famous. She never once mentioned it to anyone on campus. The military uncle one person said their uncle was supposedly a consultant who traveled internationally. Years later, at his funeral, military officials showed up to honor him. Turns out he had been working in intelligence for decades, and his business trips were actually missions. My partner just discovered her dad had a second family while still being married, albeit separated, from his wife. Second family has been around for 20 years. They all thought he was divorced, and that the first family was simply snubbing them. First family had no idea. We only found out about the second family because he has rapidly advancing dementia, and the second family called in the first family for medical help. This man still had a separate P.O. box and storage unit that he kept apart from both families. So we spent the last month joking that the third family is living in the storage unit. I have an acquaintance whose dad owned a company and often went abroad, since the company's manufacturing is done entirely in South Asia. This year, he asked my acquaintance's mother, who is his long-standing wife in Europe, if his 15-year-old son from his long-term relationship in SE could come live with them because the son had a falling out with his mother. To say his wife and kids were and still are in shock is an understatement. The son eventually did move to their country, and his youngest daughters are in the process of moving there as well, but the European wife is understandably divorcing him. My GF has a crazy double story about her aunt's ex-husband. She found out he had a mistress and dumped his ass, then realized the mistress had been his employee, and realized they had spoken on the phone before. Years went by. Then my GF was talking to a friend, and she told this story about her aunt, and they pieced together that the mistress had been her friend's aunt and they had met many times without knowing the connection. My parents were good friends in the late 80s with this couple. They all played in their euchre league together, which was focused around Dad's 4 siblings and then others. They were good enough friends, Dad even loaned us some money for the down payment for his tractor-trailer truck. He died on the younger side. Turned out as a long-haul trucker, he had another wife in the U.S., plus another girlfriend he was engaged to. I'm typically a very quiet person, with as many obituaries have stated a keen sense of humor. Some say I'm practically a comedian, I just don't practice. I'm one of the best COD mobile players in the world, longest-standing RuneScape player, Habbo Hotel. I play all of the same video games as the rest of the world, and I discreetly found myself playing games with people that I've known in real life. They love me and hate my guts in real life. I'm the same guy, TLDR. It turns out my cubicle is shared with a guy that thinks I'm completely computer illiterate. My ex-husband was alcoholic in recovery, had 5 girlfriends, all of which knew he was married and told me he was going to AA to date them. For those who don't know, sobriety is a commitment, and AA daily is not a huge surprise if you actually go. Anyway, they found out about each other and then found out I was clueless, and then he started a new round of girlfriends. I guess it's how he got off alcohol. I feel sorry for him now, but that was a dark time in my life. At my mom's funeral, I found out my grandfather had a previous family he had abandoned. There's no great story there because my entire family is messed up in different ways. My aunt, who was estranged from me, but not my mom, showed up and was just like, "You know you have another uncle, right? He shows up on Ancestry.com." My ex-fiancé baby daddy had been increasingly distant for a long period of time. Our relationship was in shambles. I tried very hard to hold on to the relationship, but he was also physically abusive. Well, I grew increasingly suspicious of him, and one night he fell asleep with a video playing on his phone. So I took the chance and grabbed his phone and went through his messages. I found multiple message threads between him and multiple men arranging hookups. There were nudes, the discussion of me not being home at certain times, tongue baths. Well, come to find out, my baby daddy ex-fiancé was smoking meth and fucking men and transgender people for a long period of time behind my back. I ended up leaving him with our 2 children. I walked in on my very 70-old, closed-minded, conservative, and somewhat bigoted fiancé in the middle of my living room floor with another man. Sadly, my 18-year-old daughter was with me because he thought we would be gone all day. When I pointed out to him that he was the very people I always accused him of hating, he explained that he was 2 people. One of them would never be accepted by the people he wanted most to be like.